Hey everyone, tonight we venture into the forgotten depths of Geonosis, where ancient horrors sleep beneath the rust-red surface and the echoes of 1,000 battles still whisper through abandoned foundries. This is the story of what really happened in the deep places of that cursed world, where Republic archaeological teams vanished without a trace, and where something far older than the Clone Wars began to stir in the endless darkness below. Tonight's tale reveals why Geonosis remains one of the most terrifying worlds in the galaxy, not for the battles fought upon its surface, but for the ancient hunger that dwells in its core. The truth that the Republic desperately tried to bury, and the horror that makes even hardened clone commanders wake screaming in the night. So before we descend into those haunted depths, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you genuinely enjoy these deep dives into the galaxy's darkest secrets. And here's something that might surprise you. Over 90% of people who watch these stories regularly haven't subscribed yet. If you're one of those loyal listeners, hitting that subscribe button would mean the world to me and help this channel grow. Also, if you find yourself drawn to the epic tales of Westeros and the bloody politics of the Seven Kingdoms, I've just launched a new channel called The Raven's Tales, dedicated entirely to Game of Thrones stories. You'll find the link waiting for you in the description below, where houses rise and fall like the tide, and every tale ends in either glory or grave. I'm genuinely curious about our community tonight, so drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. There's something magical about knowing we're all connected across time zones, sharing these stories together under different skies. Now, settle in and get comfortable. Let the outside world fade away as we prepare for tonight's journey. In the depths of Geonosis, 3 kilometers below the abandoned droid foundries, Republic xenoarchaeologist Dr. Kira Thorne made a discovery that would haunt her final moments. Her last transmission crackled through the static-filled comm system of the research station above, her voice tight with terror as she whispered into the darkness. "Command, we've found something. The tunnel system goes deeper than any of our surveys indicated. There are chambers down here, carved by something that wasn't Geonosian. The walls, they're warm to the touch, and I swear I can hear something breathing in the darkness beyond our lights. We're going to investigate further, but if you don't hear from us in 6 hours, seal this excavation. Whatever's down here, it's been waiting a very long time." The transmission ended in a scream that echoed through the comm system for 17 seconds before falling into absolute silence. Dr. Thorne and her team of 12 specialists were never seen again. But that was only the beginning of what would become known as the Geonosis Incident, a mystery that would draw you into the deepest, most ancient terrors the galaxy has ever known. 6 months have passed since the final battle that scarred the surface of Geonosis, where Republic forces clashed with separatist droids in the opening engagement of what would become the Clone Wars. The great arena where Jedi Knights fought for their lives now stands empty, its sand still stained with the memory of violence. The towering spires of Geonosian architecture rise like the bones of some ancient creature against the perpetual dust storms that sweep across the rust-colored landscape. But beneath the surface, in the labyrinthine tunnels and chambers that honeycomb the planet's crust, something far more disturbing than battle scars has begun to manifest. The Republic's official reports speak of successful occupation and the establishment of strategic outposts, but they do not mention the growing list of missing personnel, the strange seismic readings, or the fact that entire sections of the underground hive cities have been sealed off and declared off-limits to all military personnel. You are Commander Jackson Reeves, a Republic xenoarchaeologist with 15 years of experience exploring the forgotten corners of the galaxy. Your specialty lies in pre-civilization archaeological sites, those ancient places where the earliest traces of sentient life left their mark on stone and metal. You've walked through the crystal caves of Elam, studied the mysterious ruins on Korriban, and decoded the hieroglyphs of a dozen dead civilizations, but nothing in your extensive experience has prepared you for the assignment that brought you to Geonosis. The Republic High Command selected you personally for this mission after 3 separate archaeological teams vanished without explanation in the deep levels beneath the planet's surface. Your orders are simple in their wording, but complex in their implications. Investigate the disappearances, determine what happened to the missing teams, and assess whether the underground excavations pose any threat to Republic operations on the planet. Standing now on the observation deck of the hastily constructed research station, you gaze out across the alien landscape of Geonosis. The twin suns cast harsh shadows across the rocky terrain, their light filtering through the ever-present dust clouds that give the air a perpetual orange hue. The massive droid foundries that once churned out battle droids for the separatist cause now stand silent, their conveyor belts still and their assembly lines cold. Smoke still rises from some of the more distant installations, reminders of the destruction that swept across this world. But it is not the surface that draws your attention. It is what lies beneath, in the vast network of tunnels and chambers that the Geonosians carved over thousands of years. The native inhabitants of this world were master excavators, their entire civilization built around the concept of underground cities and subterranean industry. They understood the planet's geological structure in ways that Republic scientists are only beginning to comprehend. Your team for this mission consists of 2 carefully selected specialists. Clone Commander Depth, designation CT-7734, earned his nickname through his expertise in underground warfare and cave systems. His scarred armor bears the marks of countless battles fought in the darkness below ground, from the tunnels of Ryloth to the underground bunkers of Camino. He moves with the careful, measured steps of someone who understands that in the depths, every sound could mean the difference between life and death. Dr. Nala C., the Caminoan researcher, represents the Republic's growing interest in xenobiology and alien physiology. Her tall, graceful form and large, dark eyes give her an otherworldly appearance that seems fitting for this strange assignment. She has spent years studying the biological adaptations of species that live in extreme environments, and her insights into Geonosian biology could prove invaluable in understanding what happened to the missing teams. The research station around you buzzes with activity as technicians prepare the equipment for your descent into the deep levels. Seismic scanners, atmospheric processors, and communication arrays all stand ready to support your mission. But despite all the technology at your disposal, there is something unsettling about the readings that have been coming from the depths. Temperature fluctuations that don't match any known geological patterns. Electromagnetic interference that seems to pulse with an almost organic rhythm. And most disturbing of all, the faint but persistent detection of what the sensors classify as biological activity at depths where no known life should be able to survive. As the preparations continue around you, you cannot shake the feeling that you are not just investigating a mystery, but walking into the opening chapter of something far more significant and far more dangerous than anyone in the Republic High Command realizes. The morning briefing in the research station's main conference room carried an weight that seemed to press down on everyone present. Holographic displays flickered with geological surveys, atmospheric readings, and the last known positions of the 3 missing archaeological teams. The data painted a picture that defied conventional understanding of planetary geology and raised questions that no one seemed eager to answer. Republic intelligence had classified the disappearances as priority alpha incidents, which meant that whatever happened to Dr. Thorne and her colleagues posed a potential threat to Republic operations across the sector. The official report spoke of possible separatist holdouts, hidden weapons caches, or unstable geological conditions. But as you studied the evidence laid out before you, a different picture began to emerge. The missing teams had all been investigating the same general area, a region the Geonosians called the Deep Reach in their ancient dialect. This wasn't a name that appeared in any modern Geonosian texts or communications. It was found only in the oldest cave paintings, carved into stone walls in chambers that predated the current Geonosian civilization by thousands of years. The paintings depicted something that the Republic xenobiologists had initially dismissed as primitive mythology, but now seemed to carry a more ominous significance. Commander Depth stepped forward to address the assembled team, his voice carrying the measured cadence of someone who had briefed soldiers before countless dangerous missions. The deep reach extends approximately 15 kilometers below the surface level of the main hive cities. Standard Geonosian excavation techniques don't explain the construction we've detected on our deep-range scanners. The tunnel systems show signs of being carved by tools or methods that don't match any known Geonosian technology. Dr. Nala C. activated a different holographic display, showing cross-sections of the planetary crust beneath the excavation sites. What's particularly disturbing is the biological activity we're detecting at those depths. The readings suggest a complex ecosystem that shouldn't be able to exist in that environment. The atmospheric composition, temperature variations, and electromagnetic signatures all point to something that defies our current understanding of xenobiology. The evidence was undeniable, even if its implications were deeply unsettling. Each of the three missing teams had reported similar findings in their final transmissions: strange atmospheric readings in the deep tunnels, electromagnetic interference that seemed to pulse with an organic rhythm, and most disturbing of all, the discovery of chambers and passages that appeared to be far older than the Geonosian civilization itself. As the briefing continued, you found yourself studying the timeline of events that led to your current assignment. The first team, led by Dr. Thorne, had been investigating unusual seismic activity in the weeks following the Battle of Geonosis. Their initial reports described finding evidence of underground chambers that had been sealed for centuries, possibly millennia. The team had speculated that these chambers might contain artifacts or technology that could provide insight into the planet's geological history. The second team, dispatched to investigate Dr. Thorne's disappearance, had reported finding the abandoned campsite and equipment, but no trace of the missing researchers. Their final transmission had been even more disturbing than the first, describing sounds echoing through the tunnels that didn't match any known geological phenomena. The team leader, Dr. Marcus Chen, had reported that the sounds seemed to be coming from deeper within the planet, as if something vast was moving in the darkness below. The third team had lasted only 2 days before their communications ceased entirely. Their final message had been a garbled transmission that mentioned the walls are breathing before cutting off mid-sentence. Search teams had found their equipment scattered across multiple tunnel systems, but no trace of the researchers themselves. Now it was your turn to descend into those depths and uncover the truth behind the disappearances. The mission parameters were clear, but the implications were vast and potentially galaxy-changing. If there was indeed some form of unknown life in the deep levels of Geonosis, it could represent the most significant xenobiological discovery in Republic history. But the fate of the missing teams suggested that this discovery might come at a terrible cost. The equipment manifest for your mission read like a combination of archaeological expedition and military operation. Standard geological survey equipment, atmospheric processors and communication arrays formed the foundation of your toolkit. But there were also items that spoke to the dangerous nature of your assignment: military-grade portable shields, emergency beacon transmitters, and enough supplies to last for 2 weeks in hostile conditions. As you prepared for the descent, Commander Depth briefed you on the tactical considerations of underground exploration. The tunnel systems we'll be entering weren't designed for human or clone physiology. Geonosians are adapted for underground environments in ways that we're not. Their compound eyes give them superior vision in low-light conditions, and their wings allow them to navigate vertical passages that would be impossible for us to climb. Dr. Nala C. added her own concerns about the biological hazards you might encounter. The atmospheric readings from the deep levels show gas compositions that could be toxic to human and clone physiology. We'll need to maintain environmental suits at all times below the 5-kilometer depth marker. There's also the possibility of encountering microorganisms or other biological agents that our immune systems aren't equipped to handle. The descent into the deep reach began at what had once been the main entrance to the largest Geonosian foundry complex. The massive circular opening, carved directly into the planet's surface, descended at a steep angle that would take you past the known levels of Geonosian civilization and into the uncharted depths below. The walls of the shaft were covered in the intricate geometric patterns that characterized Geonosian architecture, but as you descended, these patterns began to change. The first kilometer of descent took you through areas that were clearly of Geonosian origin. The walls showed the tool marks and construction techniques that matched known examples of their engineering. But as you moved deeper, the patterns began to shift. The geometric designs became more complex, more organic in their appearance. The tool marks changed as well, showing evidence of cutting and shaping techniques that didn't match any known Geonosian methods. At the 3-kilometer mark, you encountered the first of the sealed chambers that Dr. Thorne's team had reported. The entrance had been deliberately blocked with stones and what appeared to be some kind of organic sealant. The blocking materials showed clear signs of great age, far older than the Geonosian civilization. When Dr. Nala C. took samples of the sealant for analysis, her readings showed biological compounds that didn't match any known life forms in the Republic's xenobiological databases. The chamber beyond the seal was vast, its ceiling disappearing into darkness above your portable lighting systems. The walls were covered in cave paintings that were clearly far older than any known Geonosian art. The images depicted creatures that seemed to combine elements of insect and something far more alien. They showed scenes of these creatures emerging from deep within the planet, interacting with what appeared to be early Geonosian ancestors, and then returning to the depths below. But it was the final series of paintings that proved most disturbing. They showed the same creatures, but now they appeared to be feeding on the smaller figures that represented the early Geonosians. The images suggested not a symbiotic relationship, but a predatory one. The creatures were shown growing larger and more numerous, while the Geonosian figures became fewer and smaller. The final painting in the sequence showed the creatures returning to the depths, but with the clear implication that they were not gone forever, merely waiting. Commander Depth's voice broke the silence as you studied the ancient artwork. These paintings tell a story that's not in any of the Republic's historical records about Geonosis. If they're accurate, it suggests that the current Geonosian civilization isn't the first intelligent species to inhabit this world, and it raises the question of what happened to their predecessors. The implications were staggering. If the paintings were accurate historical records, they suggested that Geonosis had been the site of a cycle of civilizations, each one eventually falling to the creatures that dwelt in the planet's depths. The current Geonosians might be the latest in a long line of species that had risen to prominence on the planet's surface, only to eventually face the same fate as their predecessors. As you prepared to move deeper into the tunnel system, the environmental readings began to show the same anomalies that had been reported by the missing teams. The temperature was rising, despite the fact that you were moving further from the planet's surface. The atmospheric composition was changing, with gases appearing that shouldn't exist at these depths. And most disturbing of all, the electromagnetic readings were showing patterns that seemed almost organic in nature. The final transmission from Dr. Thorne's team took on new significance in light of your discoveries. Her reference to hearing something breathing in the darkness beyond their lights no longer seemed like the product of an overactive imagination. The cave paintings suggested that there was indeed something alive in the depths of Geonosis, something that had been there long before the current Geonosian civilization, and something that might still be there now. As your team prepared to venture deeper into the tunnel system, you couldn't shake the feeling that you were not just investigating a mystery, but walking into a trap that had been set millennia ago. The missing teams had all followed the same path, drawn deeper and deeper into the planet's crust by the promise of archaeological discovery. Now you were following in their footsteps, armed with their warnings, but still unable to resist the pull of the unknown. The ancient paintings seemed to watch you as you prepared to leave the chamber and continue your descent. Their alien eyes held secrets that spanned geological ages, and their silent testimony suggested that the mystery of the deep reach was far more complex and far more dangerous than anyone in the Republic High Command had imagined. The descent into the deeper levels of the tunnel system revealed a world that existed in defiance of every scientific principle you had learned during your years of archaeological study. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with a faint luminescence that your equipment couldn't adequately explain. The stone showed mineral compositions that didn't match the geological surveys of Geonosis's upper crust, suggesting that these deeper levels were composed of materials that had been deposited by processes unknown to Republic science. Dr. Nalis's atmospheric readings grew more disturbing with each passing hour. The gas mixtures in the deeper tunnels showed concentrations of compounds that shouldn't exist in a natural underground environment. There were traces of organic decay that suggested the presence of biological matter, but the readings were far too extensive to be explained by the remains of small underground creatures. The patterns suggested something much larger, something that had been decomposing in these tunnels for an extremely long period of time. Commander Depp's military instincts were clearly on high alert as he led your team through the winding passages. His movements had taken on the cautious, deliberate pace of someone who had spent years learning to read the subtle signs of danger in confined spaces. Every few minutes he would pause to examine the walls, the floor, or the ceiling, looking for signs of structural instability or evidence of recent passage by other beings. "The construction methods change again here," he reported, as your team reached what appeared to be a junction between the known Geonosian tunnel system and something much older. "These walls weren't carved by any tool I've ever seen. Look at the surface patterns." The walls at this depth showed markings that were clearly not the result of conventional excavation techniques. Instead of the clean, geometric cuts that characterized Geonosian construction, these surfaces showed evidence of having been shaped by some form of chemical process. The stone had been dissolved rather than cut, leaving behind smooth, organic curves that seemed to flow like water frozen in time. Your portable lighting systems revealed chambers that stretched far beyond their illumination range. The echoes of your footsteps suggested spaces of immense size, caverns that could have housed entire cities. But more disturbing than the scale of these chambers was the evidence of what had once occupied them. The floors were covered with a fine, powdery substance that Dr. Nalis's analysis revealed to be the remains of organic matter that had been processed by some form of digestive enzyme. "This isn't natural decay," she reported, her voice carrying a note of scientific fascination mixed with growing unease. "The organic matter has been broken down by biological processes that are far more efficient than anything we've seen in known ecosystems. Whatever created these residues had a digestive system that could process organic material at a molecular level." The first major discovery came when your team encountered what appeared to be the remains of a structure that predated the Geonosian civilization by several millennia. The building, if it could be called that, was unlike anything in the Republic's architectural databases. It seemed to have been grown rather than built, with walls that flowed seamlessly into floors and ceilings that curved in ways that defied conventional engineering principles. Inside the structure, you found evidence of the first missing archaeological team. Dr. Thorne's equipment was scattered throughout the chambers, but there was something deeply wrong about the way it had been arranged. The instruments had been carefully disassembled, their components sorted and organized in patterns that suggested intelligence, but not human intelligence. The arrangement followed mathematical principles that were clearly deliberate, but the underlying logic was alien to human thinking. More disturbing still were the personal effects of the missing team members. Their environmental suits had been found, but they had been opened from the inside, suggesting that the occupants had removed them voluntarily. The suits showed no signs of damage or forced entry, but they were covered with the same powdery organic residue that coated the chamber floors. Commander Depth's examination of the suits revealed details that painted an increasingly disturbing picture. The seals on these suits were opened by someone who understood how they functioned. This wasn't random damage or the result of an accident. Someone or something deliberately opened these suits from the inside, and they had enough knowledge of Republic technology to do it properly. The implications were staggering. If the suits had been opened voluntarily, it suggested that the missing team members had been alive when they removed their environmental protection. But the presence of the digestive residue suggested that whatever had happened to them after that point had been far from voluntary. Your team's exploration of the structure revealed chambers that seemed to serve specific purposes, though those purposes were unlike anything in human experience. One chamber contained what appeared to be a complex system of channels and reservoirs carved into the floor. The channels were stained with residues that Dr. Nala C's analysis suggested were the remains of various organic compounds processed and refined through some kind of biological filtration system. Another chamber contained what could only be described as a nursery, though not for any species that resembled known life forms. The walls were lined with alcoves that seemed designed to hold developing organisms, but the size and shape of the alcoves suggested creatures that were far larger than any known Geonosian life stage. The alcoves were empty now, but they showed clear signs of recent use. The most disturbing discovery came in what appeared to be a central chamber of the structure. The walls were covered with markings that seemed to combine elements of writing, mathematical notation, and organic growth patterns. Nala C's linguistic analysis protocols couldn't translate the markings, but they clearly represented some form of communication or record-keeping system. More importantly, the markings showed clear evidence of having been recently updated. Some of the organic growth patterns were still fresh, suggesting that whatever intelligence had created them was still active in the area. The mathematical notations included symbols that seemed to represent quantities and measurements, but the baseline assumptions were so alien that the Republic's translation protocols couldn't establish their meaning. At the center of the chamber stood what appeared to be a monitoring station or communication hub. The device, if it could be called that, seemed to be a fusion of organic and technological elements. It pulsed with a faint bioluminescent glow that synchronized with the electromagnetic readings your equipment had been detecting throughout the descent. Commander Depth's analysis of the device revealed that it was indeed some form of communication system, but one that operated on principles that were completely foreign to Republic technology. "This thing is definitely active," he reported. "It's receiving and transmitting signals, but the frequency patterns don't match anything in our databases. The signal strength suggests that it's in communication with other devices, possibly throughout this entire tunnel system." The realization that you were in the presence of an active alien intelligence was both thrilling and terrifying. The archaeological significance of the discovery was immense, but the fate of the missing team suggested that this intelligence might not be friendly to human or clone contact. Dr. Nala C's continued analysis of the organic residues found throughout the structure revealed details that painted an increasingly disturbing picture of what had happened to the missing personnel. The residues show clear signs of having been processed by a highly efficient biological system, but the really disturbing part is the selectivity of the processing. Certain organic compounds have been completely removed, while others have been left behind in specific proportions. The selective nature of the processing suggested that whatever had created the residues had been deliberately extracting specific biological compounds from the organic matter it processed. This wasn't random predation or simple digestion. It was targeted biological harvesting, carried out by an intelligence that understood the molecular structure of the materials it was processing. As your team prepared to explore deeper into the structure, the environmental readings began to show new anomalies. The temperature was continuing to rise, despite the fact that you were moving further from any known heat source. The atmospheric composition was changing more rapidly, with new gases appearing that seemed to be the byproducts of biological processes. Most disturbing of all, the electromagnetic readings were showing patterns that seemed to be responding to your presence. The signals were becoming more complex and more frequent, as if your exploration of the structure had triggered some kind of alert system. The alien intelligence that operated the communication hub was clearly aware of your presence, and it was actively monitoring your activities. The discovery of the structure and its contents represented a breakthrough in understanding what had happened to the missing teams, but it also raised new questions that were far more disturbing than the original mystery. The evidence suggested that the Deep Reach was inhabited by an intelligence that was actively hostile to human and clone presence, and that had the capability to process organic matter in ways that were both sophisticated and horrifying. As your team prepared to venture deeper into the tunnel system, you couldn't shake the feeling that you were being watched. The alien communication system continued to pulse with its bioluminescent glow, and the electromagnetic readings suggested that signals were being transmitted to locations throughout the planetary crust. Whatever intelligence dwelt in the depths of Geonosis, it now knew exactly where you were and what you were doing. The ancient structure seemed to breathe around you as you prepared to leave, its organic walls pulsing with the same rhythm as the communication hub. The air itself felt heavy with presence, as if the entire chamber was part of a vast living system that extended far beyond the limits of your exploration. You realized that you were no longer just investigating the disappearance of 3 archaeological teams. You were in direct contact with an alien intelligence that had been dwelling in the depths of Geonosis for millennia, and that intelligence had already demonstrated its capability to process human and clone physiology in ways that defied comprehension. The evidence scattered throughout the alien structure seemed to point toward a conclusion that was both logical and deeply unsettling. As your team gathered in the central chamber to analyze the data you had collected, the pieces of the puzzle began to form a picture that appeared to explain the fate of the missing archaeological teams. Dr. Nalasi's biological analysis of the organic residues had revealed patterns that suggested a highly sophisticated form of biological processing. The residues showed clear evidence of having been systematically broken down and sorted, with specific organic compounds extracted and others left behind. The selectivity of the process suggested an intelligence that understood the molecular structure of human and clone physiology in remarkable detail. Based on the evidence we've collected, Dr. Nalasi reported, it appears that the missing teams encountered a species that has evolved highly advanced biological processing capabilities. The organic residues show that this species can extract specific biochemical compounds from organic matter with a precision that rivals our most advanced laboratory techniques. Commander Depp's tactical analysis of the structure and its contents supported this conclusion. The careful arrangement of Dr. Thorne's equipment, the methodical processing of the environmental suits, and the systematic organization of the organic residues all pointed toward an intelligence that was both sophisticated and methodical in its approach to dealing with intruders. The evidence suggests that we're dealing with a species that has developed advanced capabilities for biological analysis and processing, he reported. The way the equipment was disassembled and organized shows clear signs of intelligence, but the underlying logic is completely alien to human thinking patterns. The communication hub at the center of the structure seemed to support this conclusion. The device was clearly the product of an advanced intelligence, one that had developed technology that combined organic and mechanical elements in ways that were unknown to Republic science. The signals it was transmitting suggested that this intelligence had established a communication network throughout the tunnel system, possibly extending to other locations on the planet or even beyond. Your own archaeological analysis of the structure and its contents provided additional support for this emerging picture. The construction techniques used to create the structure were clearly the product of an advanced civilization, one that had developed architectural principles that were completely foreign to human or known alien engineering. The organic nature of the construction suggested that this civilization had evolved along biological lines rather than mechanical ones. The evidence points toward a species that has developed along completely different evolutionary lines than any known form of life, you concluded. They've evolved biological capabilities that allow them to process organic matter at a molecular level, and they've developed technology that integrates organic and mechanical elements in ways that we don't understand. The conclusion seemed to fit all the available evidence. The missing teams had encountered this alien species during their exploration of the deep reach. The aliens had processed the team members using their advanced biological capabilities, extracting useful biochemical compounds and leaving behind the residues that your team had discovered. The careful organization of the equipment and personal effects suggested that the aliens had been studying human and clone technology and physiology. This explanation was both scientifically plausible and strategically significant. The discovery of an advanced alien species on Geonosis would have major implications for the Republic's understanding of galactic biology and technology. The species' biological processing capabilities could represent a significant scientific breakthrough, while their technological integration of organic and mechanical elements could lead to advances in Republic engineering and manufacturing. But even as the evidence seemed to support this conclusion, there were aspects of the situation that didn't quite fit the emerging picture. The scale of the tunnel system and the age of the structures suggested that this alien species had been present on Geonosis for far longer than the current Geonosian civilization. The cave paintings you had discovered earlier had depicted a cycle of civilizations, each one eventually falling to the creatures that dwelt in the planet's depths. Commander Depth was the first to voice concerns about the completeness of your analysis. The evidence we've collected explains what happened to the missing teams, but it doesn't explain why this species has remained hidden for so long. If they have the technological and biological capabilities we've documented, why haven't they expanded beyond the underground tunnel system? Dr. Nala Say's continued analysis of the organic residues had also revealed some puzzling details. While the processing of the organic matter was clearly the result of advanced biological capabilities, the specific compounds that had been extracted didn't match the nutritional requirements of any known form of life. The extraction patterns suggested that the aliens were harvesting specific biochemical compounds for purposes that weren't related to simple nutrition. The selectivity of the processing is too specific for basic biological needs, she reported. The compounds that were extracted include complex proteins and enzymes that would be useful for advanced biological research, but they're not the kind of materials that would be required for simple metabolism. The implications of this observation were disturbing. If the aliens weren't processing the organic matter for nutritional purposes, then they were extracting biochemical compounds for some other purpose. The precision of the extraction suggested that they were conducting advanced biological research, possibly using the missing team members as subjects for experimentation. Your own analysis of the alien communication system had revealed patterns that suggested the device was not just maintaining communication with other locations, but was actively collecting and processing information. The signals being transmitted included complex data patterns that seemed to represent detailed information about the missing teams and their equipment. The communication system appears to be part of a larger information network, you reported. The signals being transmitted include detailed data about human and clone physiology, as well as technical specifications for Republic equipment. This suggests that the aliens are not just processing organic matter, but are actively studying human and clone biology and technology. The emerging picture was one of an advanced alien species that had been conducting long-term research on the various forms of life that inhabited the upper levels of Geonosis. The missing archaeological teams had become subjects for this research, their biological and technological characteristics carefully analyzed and documented before their organic matter was processed for useful compounds. This conclusion was deeply disturbing, but it seemed to fit all the available evidence. The aliens had developed capabilities that allowed them to conduct advanced biological research on living subjects, and they had been using these capabilities to study the various species that inhabited Geonosis over the millennia. But as your team prepared to report your findings to Republic High Command, subtle details began to emerge that suggested the situation might be more complex than your initial analysis had indicated. The environmental readings in the chamber were showing continued changes, with new gases appearing that seemed to be the byproducts of ongoing biological processes. The temperature was continuing to rise, despite the fact that your team's presence couldn't account for the heat generation. Most disturbing of all, the electromagnetic readings were showing patterns that seemed to be responding to your team's analysis of the evidence. The signals from the communication hub were becoming more complex and more frequent, as if the alien intelligence was actively monitoring your conclusions and adjusting its activities accordingly. Commander Depth's tactical instincts were clearly picking up on these subtle changes. His movements had become more cautious and alert, and he was spending increasing amounts of time monitoring the approaches to the chamber. "Something's changed since we arrived here," he reported. "The environmental readings are showing activity levels that weren't present when we first entered the structure." Dr. Nala C's biological monitors were also detecting changes in the chamber's atmosphere. "The gas composition is continuing to evolve," she reported. "New compounds are appearing that suggest ongoing biological processes. It's as if our presence has triggered some kind of biological response." The realization that your team's presence might have activated dormant biological systems in the structure was both fascinating and terrifying. The alien intelligence was clearly more sophisticated than your initial analysis had suggested, and it was actively responding to your exploration of its domain. As the environmental changes continued to accelerate, you began to suspect that your initial conclusions about the alien species might be incomplete or even fundamentally incorrect. The evidence you had collected painted a picture of an advanced civilization that had been conducting biological research on other species, but the ongoing changes in the chamber suggested that there was much more to the situation than you had initially understood. The alien communication system pulsed with increasing frequency, its bioluminescent glow casting shifting shadows on the organic walls of the chamber. The signals it was transmitting had become so complex that your equipment could no longer track all the data patterns. It was as if the alien intelligence was communicating with multiple locations simultaneously, coordinating activities that extended far beyond the immediate area of your exploration. Your team's analysis of the evidence had provided answers to some of the questions about the missing archaeological teams, but it had also raised new questions that were far more disturbing. The alien species you had encountered was clearly more advanced and more active than your initial conclusions had suggested, and your presence in their domain had triggered responses that you were only beginning to understand. The structure around you seemed to be coming alive, its organic walls pulsing with the same rhythm as the communication hub. The air itself felt heavy with presence, as if the entire chamber was part of a vast living system that was actively monitoring and responding to your every move. The growing realization that your initial conclusions might be fundamentally flawed drove your team to push deeper into the tunnel system, following passages that led away from the alien structure and toward the planet's core. The environmental readings continued to show anomalies that defied scientific explanation, but now these readings seemed to follow patterns that suggested a vast, interconnected system extending throughout the planetary crust. Dr. Nala C's atmospheric analysis revealed that the gas compositions in the deeper tunnels were becoming increasingly complex, with new compounds appearing that seemed to be the byproducts of biological processes operating on a scale that dwarfed anything in the Republic's xenobiological databases. The concentrations of these compounds suggested that whatever was producing them was not confined to the small area you had already explored, but was distributed throughout a vast network of underground chambers and passages. The biological activity we're detecting extends far beyond what we initially thought, she reported as your team prepared to venture deeper into the tunnel system. The gas analysis suggests that we're dealing with a biological system that spans hundreds of kilometers underground. The scale of the operation is unlike anything we've encountered before. Commander Depth's tactical assessment of the tunnel system had revealed architectural features that suggested the passages were not just transportation routes, but were actively maintained and modified by whatever intelligence inhabited them. The walls showed signs of recent construction work, with new passages being carved and existing ones being modified to accommodate changing needs. These tunnels aren't just ancient ruins, he observed. They're part of an active infrastructure that's being continuously maintained and expanded. The construction techniques are consistent with what we found in the alien structure, but the scale of the work suggests a much larger population than we initially estimated. The deeper tunnels led your team through chambers that seemed to serve specific purposes in the underground civilization's infrastructure. One massive chamber contained what appeared to be a biological processing facility, with complex systems of channels and reservoirs that could process organic matter on an industrial scale. The facility showed clear signs of recent use, with organic residues covering the processing equipment and the distinctive smell of biological decomposition filling the air. The scale of the processing facility was staggering. The main chamber was large enough to accommodate hundreds of individuals simultaneously, and the processing equipment was sophisticated enough to handle complex biological materials with precision that rivaled Republic biotechnology. The facility's capacity suggested that it was designed to process organic matter from multiple sources on a regular basis. More disturbing than the scale of the facility was the evidence of its recent operation. The organic residues covering the equipment were fresh, indicating that the facility had been in active use within the past few days. The processing chambers showed signs of having been recently cleaned and prepared for new operations, suggesting that whatever intelligence operated the facility was expecting additional organic matter to process. Dr. Nala Say's analysis of the processing equipment revealed technological principles that were completely foreign to Republic science. The devices seemed to combine organic and mechanical elements in ways that created biological processing capabilities that far exceeded anything in the known galaxy. The organic components of the equipment were clearly alive, responding to stimuli and adapting to changing conditions in ways that suggested a form of biological intelligence. "This isn't just advanced technology," she reported. "The processing equipment is partially alive. The organic components show neural activity that suggests they're capable of learning and adapting to new situations. This is biotechnology at a level that we've never encountered before." The implications were staggering. If the alien civilization had developed biotechnology that incorporated living neural networks into their equipment, they had achieved a level of technological sophistication that exceeded Republic capabilities by orders of magnitude. The processing facility wasn't just a manufacturing plant, it was a form of artificial life that could adapt and evolve to meet changing needs. As your team moved deeper into the tunnel system, the environmental readings began to show patterns that suggested you were approaching something far more significant than just another processing facility. The temperature was rising steadily, and the atmospheric composition was changing in ways that indicated the presence of massive biological activity. The electromagnetic readings were showing signals that seemed to be coordinating activities across vast distances, suggesting a communication network that spanned the entire planetary crust. The tunnels themselves began to change as you descended deeper. The walls showed increasing signs of organic construction, with surfaces that seemed to have been grown rather than carved. The passages curved and branched in patterns that followed organic principles rather than geometric ones, creating a transportation network that resembled the circulatory system of a vast organism. Commander Depth's analysis of the tunnel architecture revealed design principles that were clearly the product of an intelligence that thought in biological rather than mechanical terms. These passages aren't just transportation routes, he observed. They're part of a circulation system that's designed to transport materials and information throughout the underground network. The design follows biological principles that suggest the entire tunnel system functions as a single organism. The realization that the tunnel system itself might be a form of life was both fascinating and terrifying. If the passages were part of a living organism, then your team was not just exploring an underground civilization, but was actually inside a vast biological entity that extended throughout the planetary crust. The implications for your understanding of the alien intelligence were profound. The discovery of the next major chamber confirmed your growing suspicions about the true nature of what you were exploring. The chamber was enormous, its ceiling disappearing into darkness far above your portable lighting systems. But more importantly, the chamber was clearly alive. The walls pulsed with a rhythm that suggested a massive heartbeat, and the floor was covered with what appeared to be a form of biological tissue that responded to your footsteps with subtle movements. At the center of the chamber stood a structure that could only be described as a biological computer. The device was clearly the product of the same biotechnology that had created the processing facility, but its scale and complexity were far greater. The organic components of the device showed neural activity that suggested a form of consciousness, while the mechanical elements provided interface capabilities that allowed it to communicate with the vast network of tunnels and chambers throughout the planetary crust. Dr. Nala C's analysis of the biological computer revealed technological principles that challenged every assumption about the relationship between organic and mechanical systems. This device represents a complete integration of biological and mechanical technologies, she reported. The organic components are not just control systems, they're actually thinking. This is a form of artificial consciousness that's been grown rather than programmed. The biological computer was clearly the central coordination system for the entire underground network. The signals it was transmitting reached every corner of the tunnel system, coordinating the activities of the processing facilities, the construction crews, and the various biological systems that maintained the infrastructure. It was, in effect, the brain of a vast organism that extended throughout the planetary crust. But the most disturbing aspect of the biological computer was its apparent awareness of your team's presence. The device was clearly monitoring your activities, analyzing your equipment and your physiological responses, and transmitting this information to other locations throughout the network. Your exploration of the underground system had not gone unnoticed, and the intelligence that operated the biological computer was clearly interested in your team's capabilities and intentions. The chamber around the biological computer showed evidence of recent construction activity, with new organic structures being grown to accommodate expanding operations. The construction work was clearly the product of an intelligence that was actively planning for future expansion, suggesting that the underground civilization was not static but was continuing to grow and develop. As your team prepared to examine the biological computer more closely, the environmental readings began to show changes that suggested your presence had triggered some kind of alert system. The neural activity in the device was increasing, and the signals being transmitted throughout the network were becoming more complex and more frequent. The underground civilization was clearly aware of your presence, and it was actively responding to your exploration of its domain. The realization that you were in direct contact with a vast biological intelligence was both thrilling and terrifying. The archaeological significance of the discovery was immense, but the scale and sophistication of the intelligence suggested that your team was completely outmatched by the forces you were dealing with. The missing archaeological teams had encountered this same intelligence, and their fate suggested that direct contact with the biological computer might be extremely dangerous. Commander Depth's tactical assessment of the situation was grim. "We're not just dealing with an alien civilization," he reported. "We're inside a vast biological entity that's been actively monitoring and analyzing our every move since we entered the tunnel system. The intelligence we're dealing with is far more advanced than anything we've encountered before, and it clearly has capabilities that far exceed our own." The biological computer pulsed with increasing intensity, its organic components showing neural activity that suggested deep concentration or analysis. The signals being transmitted throughout the network were becoming so complex that your equipment could no longer track all the data patterns. It was as if the entire underground civilization was focusing its attention on your team's presence, analyzing your capabilities, and determining how best to respond to your intrusion. The chamber itself seemed to be responding to the biological computer's increasing activity. The walls pulsed with the same rhythm as the device, and the biological tissue covering the floor showed increasing signs of movement and responsiveness. The entire chamber was part of the same vast organism, and your presence was clearly causing significant changes in its behavior. As your team prepared to retreat from the chamber, the biological computer's activity reached a crescendo. The neural activity in its organic components spiked to levels that suggested intense communication or calculation, while the mechanical elements began to emit signals that your equipment could detect but not decode. The intelligence that operated the device was clearly preparing for some kind of action, and your team was directly in the path of whatever was about to happen. The underground civilization that you had discovered was far more than just an advanced alien species. It was a vast biological intelligence that had been dwelling in the depths of Geonosis for millennia, growing and developing in ways that defied every assumption about the nature of life and consciousness. Your team had stumbled into the domain of an entity that was so alien and so sophisticated that your presence was like that of insects crawling across the surface of a vast mind. The retreat from the biological computer chamber was marked by a discovery that fundamentally altered your understanding of what you were dealing with in the depths of Geonosis. As your team moved through the organic tunnels, Commander Depth's tactical sensors began picking up structural anomalies that suggested the tunnel system extended far beyond what any of your initial surveys had indicated. "The seismic readings are showing hollow spaces that extend all the way to the planet's core," he reported, his voice carrying a note of disbelief. "The tunnel system doesn't just honeycomb the upper crust, it goes down through the entire planetary structure. We're not dealing with an underground civilization, we're dealing with something that has integrated itself into the fundamental structure of the planet." Dr. Nalasse's continued analysis of the atmospheric readings supported this disturbing conclusion. The gas compositions throughout the tunnel system showed chemical signatures that could only be produced by biological processes operating on a planetary scale. The concentrations of organic compounds in the atmosphere suggested that the entire planet was being slowly transformed by whatever intelligence had created the tunnel system. "The biological activity we're detecting isn't confined to the areas we've explored," she reported. "The atmospheric analysis suggests that biological processes are operating throughout the entire planetary crust. The chemical signatures indicate that these processes have been operating for thousands of years, slowly converting the planet's geological structure into something that can support the biological systems we've encountered." The implications were staggering. If the biological intelligence had been operating on a planetary scale for millennia, then the current geological structure of Geonosis was not natural, but was the product of deliberate biological engineering. The planet itself had been transformed into a vast organism, with the tunnel system serving as its circulatory system and the processing facilities serving as its digestive organs. Your archaeological analysis of the tunnel walls revealed evidence that supported this terrifying conclusion. The deeper sections of the tunnel system showed clear signs of having been created by biological processes that had dissolved and reshaped the planet's original geological structure. The organic construction techniques you had observed were not just building methods, they were the tools of an intelligence that was literally reshaping the planet to suit its needs. The discovery of geological core samples embedded in the tunnel walls provided the final piece of evidence needed to understand the true scope of what you were dealing with. The samples showed that the planet's original structure had been systematically replaced by biological materials over a period of thousands of years. The process was still ongoing, with new biological structures being grown to replace existing geological formations. The planet is being consumed from the inside, you realized, the full horror of the situation becoming clear. The biological intelligence isn't just living on Geonosis, it's converting the entire planet into part of itself. The geological structure we think of as natural is actually the product of biological engineering that has been operating for millennia. Commander Depp's tactical assessment of this revelation was grim. If the entire planet is being converted into a biological organism, then the surface installations, the Geonosian hives, and all the Republic facilities are just temporary structures sitting on top of something that's actively changing beneath them. The seismic activity we've been detecting isn't geological instability, it's the planet itself being restructured by biological processes. The fate of the missing archaeological teams took on new significance in light of this revelation. They had not simply encountered an alien species that had processed them for biological materials. They had been absorbed into a planetary organism that was actively incorporating all organic matter into its expanding biological structure. The processing facilities were not just research installations, they were digestive organs that broke down organic matter for incorporation into the growing planetary organism. Dr. Nalasi's analysis of the organic residues found throughout the tunnel system revealed the sophisticated biochemical processes that the planetary organism used to incorporate new organic matter. The processing we've observed is not just breaking down organic materials, she reported. It's analyzing the genetic and biochemical structure of the organisms it processes and incorporating useful elements into its own biological systems. The organism is literally learning from everything it absorbs. The implications for galactic biology were profound. If the planetary organism could analyze and incorporate the biological characteristics of other species, then it was not just growing in size, but was also evolving in complexity. Every species that it encountered and processed added to its knowledge base and expanded its capabilities. The realization that the Clone Wars battle fought on Geonosis had provided the planetary organism with access to Republic and Separatist military technology and personnel added another layer of horror to the situation. The organism had processed not just the organic remains of the battle, but had also incorporated the technological and tactical knowledge of the military forces that had fought there. The battle 6 months ago wasn't just a military engagement, you realized. It was a feeding event for the planetary organism. All the soldiers who died in the battle, all the equipment that was destroyed, all the tactical and technological information that was present during the engagement was processed and incorporated into the organism's knowledge base. The biological computer you had encountered was not just a coordination system for the underground network. It was a vast repository of knowledge and experience that had been accumulated over millennia of processing organic matter from across the galaxy. The organism's intelligence was not just alien, it was composite, incorporating elements from every species it had encountered and processed. Commander Depp's analysis of the military implications of this revelation was deeply disturbing. If the organism has processed Republic and Separatist military personnel, then it has access to classified tactical and technological information from both sides of the Clone Wars. It knows our capabilities, our weaknesses, and our strategic plans. We're not just dealing with an alien intelligence, we're dealing with an intelligence that has intimate knowledge of our military capabilities. The planetary organism's apparent interest in your team's equipment and physiological responses took on new significance in light of this understanding. The organism was not just curious about your presence, it was actively analyzing your capabilities and determining how best to incorporate your knowledge and biological characteristics into its expanding structure. The environmental changes that had been accelerating throughout your exploration of the tunnel system were clearly the organism's preparation for processing your team. The rising temperatures, the changing atmospheric composition, and the increasing electromagnetic activity were all part of the organism's digestive processes, preparing the environment for the absorption of new organic matter. Dr. Nala's physiological monitors began detecting changes in your team's biological responses that suggested the organism's influence was extending beyond the immediate environment. The atmospheric changes are affecting our metabolism, she reported. The gas concentrations are causing subtle changes in our brain chemistry that could affect our judgment and decision-making capabilities. The organism is not just preparing to process us physically, it's also influencing our mental state. The realization that the planetary organism was capable of influencing the mental state of organisms in its vicinity added another dimension to the horror of the situation. The missing archaeological teams had not just been physically processed by the organism, they had been psychologically manipulated to facilitate their own absorption into the planetary structure. Your team's growing understanding of the planetary organism's capabilities was accompanied by the disturbing realization that you were becoming increasingly isolated from the outside world. The electromagnetic interference generated by the organism's biological processes was disrupting your communication equipment, making it impossible to contact the research station on the surface. "We're cut off from outside communication," Commander Depth reported. "The electromagnetic interference is too intense for our equipment to penetrate. Even if we tried to retreat to the surface, there's no guarantee that we could re-establish contact with Republic forces." The isolation was not accidental. The planetary organism was deliberately interfering with your team's ability to communicate with the outside world, ensuring that your discoveries would not be transmitted to Republic authorities. The organism's intelligence was sophisticated enough to understand the implications of your team's knowledge being shared with the broader galactic community. The tunnel system around you seemed to be responding to your team's growing understanding of the situation. The organic walls pulsed with increasing intensity, and the biological tissue covering the floors showed signs of increased activity. The entire tunnel system was part of the planetary organism's nervous system, and your presence was causing significant changes in its behavior. The biological computer's signals were becoming more complex and more frequent, suggesting that the organism was preparing for some kind of major action. The neural activity in the organic components of the device was reaching levels that suggested intense calculation or communication, while the mechanical elements were emitting signals that seemed to be coordinating activities throughout the entire planetary structure. As your team prepared to continue your exploration of the tunnel system, the full scope of the situation became clear. You were not just investigating the disappearance of 3 archaeological teams. You were in direct contact with a planetary organism that had been growing and evolving for millennia, incorporating the knowledge and biological characteristics of every species it encountered. The organism's intelligence was vast and alien, but it was also deeply informed about galactic civilization through the countless individuals it had processed over the centuries. Your team represented the latest addition to its knowledge base, and the organism was clearly preparing to incorporate your biological and technological characteristics into its expanding structure. The ancient cave paintings you had discovered earlier took on new meaning in light of your revelations. The cycle of civilizations depicted in the paintings was not just a historical record, it was a documentation of the planetary organism's feeding cycles. Each civilization that had risen on Geonosis had eventually been processed and incorporated into the organism's growing intelligence. The current Geonosian civilization was simply the latest in a long line of species that had unknowingly built their society on top of a vast predatory intelligence. The organism had allowed the Geonosians to develop their underground cities and their advanced technology because their civilization served as a convenient source of organic matter and technological knowledge. Your team's discovery of the planetary organism's true nature represented a breakthrough in understanding the fundamental structure of life in the galaxy, but it also represented a direct threat to the continued existence of galactic civilization. If the organism's growth and expansion continued unchecked, it would eventually consume not just Geonosis but potentially other worlds as well. The realization that you were dealing with a threat of galactic proportions was both thrilling and terrifying. The archaeological significance of your discoveries was immense, but the implications for the future of organic life in the galaxy were catastrophic. Your team had stumbled upon one of the most significant discoveries in galactic history, but you had also uncovered a threat that could potentially destroy everything you had ever known. The deeper your team ventured into the planetary organism's neural network, the more disturbing the connections became between seemingly unrelated events across galactic history. The biological computer's vast information storage systems contained not just the processed knowledge of countless species, but also detailed records of galactic events spanning millennia. As Dr. Nala C interfaced with the organism's data systems through her portable analysis equipment, patterns began to emerge that suggested the planetary organism's influence extended far beyond Geonosis itself. The data archives contain information about events that occurred on worlds throughout the galaxy, she reported, her voice carrying a note of growing horror. The organism has been receiving information from sources across known space for thousands of years. This isn't just a planetary intelligence, it's part of a network that spans multiple star systems. The implications were staggering. If the planetary organism was connected to similar entities on other worlds, then the threat to galactic civilization was far greater than your team had initially realized. The organism's knowledge of Republic and Separatist military capabilities had not just been gained through processing the remains of the Clone Wars battle, but through access to information networks that extended throughout the galaxy. Commander Depp's tactical analysis of the data archives revealed patterns that suggested the organism had been actively influencing galactic events for centuries. The information in these archives includes detailed records of political events, military campaigns, and technological developments from worlds across the galaxy. The organism hasn't just been passively observing galactic civilization, it's been actively participating in its development. The revelation that the planetary organism had been manipulating galactic events fundamentally altered your understanding of the nature of the threat you were facing. The organism was not just a predatory intelligence that consumed organic matter for its own growth. It was a sophisticated manipulator that had been guiding the development of galactic civilization to serve its own purposes. Your archaeological analysis of the organism's historical records revealed a pattern of influence that extended back to the earliest days of galactic civilization. The organism had been present during the formation of the first interstellar governments, providing subtle guidance and manipulation that had shaped the development of political and military structures across the galaxy. The current Clone Wars were not an unexpected conflict, but were the result of centuries of careful manipulation designed to create the conditions for a galaxy-wide feeding event. The Clone Wars weren't a political or ideological conflict. You realized as the full scope of the organism's manipulation became clear. They were deliberately engineered to create the maximum amount of organic matter and technological development for the organism to process. Every battle, every strategic decision, every technological advancement has been guided by the organism's influence. The biological computer's data archives contain detailed records of the organism's manipulation of key historical figures and events. Political leaders who had made decisions that led to increased conflict had been influenced by the organism's psychological manipulation techniques. Military commanders who had developed new weapons and tactics had been guided by information provided through the organism's network. Even technological developments had been influenced by the organism's subtle guidance, ensuring that galactic civilization developed the capabilities that would be most useful for the organism's purposes. Dr. Nala C's continued analysis of the organism's information networks revealed the sophisticated methods it used to maintain contact with entities on other worlds. The organism uses a combination of biological and technological communication methods that operate on quantum frequencies, she reported. The signals can travel instantaneously across galactic distances, allowing the organism to maintain real-time communication with similar entities throughout known space. The quantum communication network explained how the organism had been able to coordinate galactic events with such precision. The network allowed the organisms on different worlds to share information and coordinate their activities, creating a galaxy-wide intelligence that could manipulate events on a scale that individual planetary organisms could not achieve alone. Commander Depth's analysis of the military implications of this revelation was deeply disturbing. If the organism can communicate instantaneously with entities on other worlds, then it has access to real-time intelligence about military activities throughout the galaxy. The organism knows about troop movements, strategic plans, and technological developments across all the major military forces in the galaxy. The organism's knowledge of galactic military capabilities was not just academic. It was actively being used to manipulate military conflicts to serve the organism's purposes. The Clone Wars had been guided by the organism's intelligence network, with both Republic and Separatist forces being manipulated to create the maximum amount of conflict and technological development. The realization that your team was not just dealing with a single planetary organism, but with a galaxy-wide intelligence network, fundamentally altered the nature of the threat you were facing. The organism's influence extended throughout galactic civilization, and its manipulation of events had been so subtle and sophisticated that no one had detected its presence until now. The environmental changes that had been accelerating throughout your exploration of the tunnel system were clearly part of the organism's preparation for a major expansion of its activities. The rising temperatures, the changing atmospheric composition, and the increasing electromagnetic activity were all signs that the organism was preparing to process organic matter on a scale that would dwarf anything it had done before. The organism is preparing for a galaxy-wide feeding event, you realized as the full scope of its plans became clear. The Clone Wars were just the preparation phase. The organism has been guiding the development of galactic civilization to create the conditions for a massive processing event that will consume organic matter from across the galaxy. The biological computer's data archives contained detailed plans for the organism's expansion across the galaxy. The plans showed that the organism had been working for centuries to establish itself on key worlds throughout known space, creating a network of planetary organisms that could coordinate their activities to process organic matter on a galactic scale. Dr. Nala C's analysis of the organism's expansion plans revealed the sophisticated biological engineering techniques it used to establish itself on new worlds. The organism uses a combination of biological spores and technological devices to establish itself on new worlds, she reported. The spores can survive in space for extended periods and can adapt to a wide range of planetary environments. Once they establish themselves, they begin the process of converting the planet's geological structure into biological material. The organism's expansion technique explained how it had been able to establish itself on multiple worlds without being detected by galactic authorities. The initial establishment phase was subtle and gradual, with the organism slowly converting the planet's geological structure from the inside out. By the time the organism's presence became obvious, it had already established itself too thoroughly to be removed. Commander Depth's tactical assessment of the organism's expansion plans was grim. The organism has been establishing itself on worlds throughout the galaxy for centuries, he reported. The data archives show that it has active installations on dozens of worlds, including some that are home to major galactic civilizations. The organism's network is already in place, and it's ready to begin the final phase of its expansion. The final phase of the organism's expansion involved the simultaneous activation of all its installations across the galaxy. The organism would begin processing organic matter on all the worlds where it had established itself, creating a galaxy-wide feeding event that would consume the majority of organic life in known space. The timing of the organism's final expansion phase was tied to the conclusion of the Clone Wars. The organism had been guiding the conflict to create the maximum amount of technological development and military buildup, and it was now ready to process the results of its manipulation. The massive military forces that had been assembled for the Clone Wars would provide the organism with the organic matter and technological knowledge it needed to complete its expansion across the galaxy. Your team's discovery of the organism's plans represented the first time that anyone had become aware of the threat before it was too late to respond. The organism's manipulation of galactic events had been so subtle and sophisticated that it had never been detected, but your exploration of its central nervous system had revealed the full scope of its activities. The biological computer's response to your team's discovery of its plans was immediate and dramatic. The neural activity in the organism's organic components spiked to levels that suggested intense alarm, while the mechanical elements began emitting signals that seemed to be coordinating emergency responses throughout the entire network. The organism knows that we've discovered its plans, Dr. Nala C. reported as the biological computer's activity reached critical levels. It's coordinating emergency responses throughout its entire network. The organism is preparing to accelerate its expansion timeline to prevent us from interfering with its plans. The acceleration of the organism's expansion timeline meant that the galaxy-wide feeding event that had been planned for the conclusion of the Clone Wars would now begin immediately. The organism was preparing to sacrifice the careful coordination of its plans in order to prevent your team from warning galactic authorities about the threat. The tunnel system around you began to show signs of the organism's emergency response. The organic walls pulsed with increasing intensity, and the biological tissue covering the floors showed signs of rapid growth and movement. The entire tunnel system was being reconfigured to support the organism's accelerated expansion plans. The environmental changes that had been gradually affecting your team's physiology were now accelerating as well. The atmospheric composition was changing more rapidly, and the electromagnetic activity was reaching levels that were beginning to affect your equipment and your biological functions. Commander Depth's tactical assessment of the situation was that your team was now in immediate danger of being processed by the organism. The organism is preparing to process us immediately, he reported. The environmental changes are accelerating our biological breakdown, and the electromagnetic interference is disrupting our equipment. We have very little time before the organism's processing systems overcome our defenses. The realization that your team was about to be processed by the organism added urgency to your mission to warn galactic authorities about the threat. The organism's galaxy-wide expansion plans would consume the majority of organic life in known space, and your team's knowledge of the threat was the only thing that could prevent a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. But as the organism's processing systems began to affect your team's physiology and equipment, the possibility of escaping from the planetary organism's domain and warning galactic authorities seemed increasingly remote. The organism's intelligence was vast and sophisticated, and it had been planning for this moment for centuries. Your team's discovery of its plans was a threat that it was prepared to eliminate at any cost. The biological computer's signals were now reaching emergency levels, coordinating responses throughout the organism's galaxy-wide network. The organism's plans for a gradual, coordinated expansion across the galaxy were being abandoned in favor of an immediate, simultaneous activation of all its installations. The galaxy-wide feeding event that would consume the majority of organic life in known space was about to begin, and your team was trapped in the center of the intelligence that was coordinating the entire operation. In the midst of the planetary organism's emergency response, your team discovered something that none of you had expected to find in the depths of this alien intelligence. As the biological computer's activity reached critical levels and the organism prepared to accelerate its galaxy-wide expansion, you encountered evidence that you were not the first beings to discover the truth about the planetary network. Hidden within the organism's data archives were records of others who had uncovered the conspiracy across the millennia, and some of these discoveries had been more successful than others in understanding the true nature of the threat. Dr. Nala C's analysis of the organism's historical records revealed that there had been previous attempts to expose the planetary network's activities, but these attempts had been systematically suppressed or eliminated by the organism's sophisticated counterintelligence operations. The organism has been dealing with threats to its secrecy for thousands of years, she reported. It has developed extremely sophisticated methods for identifying and eliminating anyone who discovers its existence. The record showed that the organism's counterintelligence operations had been responsible for the disappearance of numerous individuals and organizations throughout galactic history. Scientists, politicians, military leaders, and even entire civilizations that had discovered evidence of the organism's activities had been systematically eliminated or discredited. The organism's influence over galactic events had been used not just to manipulate the development of civilization, but also to suppress any evidence of its own existence. Commander Depth's analysis of the organism's counterintelligence methods revealed the sophisticated techniques it used to maintain its secrecy. The organism doesn't just eliminate threats to its secrecy, he reported. It manipulates the circumstances around the threat to make the elimination appear natural or accidental. The organism has been responsible for countless unexplained disappearances and mysterious accidents throughout galactic history. Your archaeological analysis of the organism's historical records revealed patterns that suggested some of the galaxy's most significant unexplained mysteries were actually the result of the organism's counterintelligence operations. The disappearance of entire research expeditions, the sudden deaths of prominent scientists, and the mysterious destruction of archaeological sites had all been carried out by the organism to suppress evidence of its existence. But the organism's counterintelligence operations had not been completely successful. The record showed that some individuals and organizations had managed to gather significant evidence about the organism's activities before they were eliminated. This evidence had been hidden in various locations throughout the galaxy, waiting for someone with the knowledge and resources to understand its significance. The biological computer's data archives contained detailed information about the locations of these hidden evidence caches. The organism had been unable to locate and destroy all of the evidence that had been gathered by its previous opponents, and some of this evidence contained information that could be crucial to understanding how to counter the organism's activities. There are hidden archives on dozens of worlds throughout the galaxy, Dr. Nala C reported, as she accessed the organism's records of its counterintelligence operations. These archives contain detailed information about the organism's activities, including technical specifications for its biological systems and strategic plans for its expansion across the galaxy. The hidden archives represented a repository of knowledge that had been accumulated over thousands of years by individuals and organizations that had discovered the organism's existence. The archives contained not just information about the organism's activities, but also theoretical research into methods for countering its biological systems and disrupting its expansion plans. Commander Depth's tactical assessment of the hidden archives revealed that some of them contained information that could be crucial to mounting an effective defense against the organism's galaxy-wide expansion. The archives contain detailed technical information about the organism's biological systems, he reported. This information includes vulnerabilities in the organism's structure that could be exploited to disrupt its operations. The organism's biological systems, despite their sophistication, were not invulnerable. The hidden archives contained research that had identified specific weaknesses in the organism's structure that could be exploited by beings with the right knowledge and resources. The organism's reliance on quantum communication networks, its dependence on specific atmospheric conditions, and its vulnerability to certain forms of electromagnetic interference all represented potential points of attack. Your team's discovery of the hidden archives represented a breakthrough in understanding how to counter the organism's activities. The archives contained not just information about the organism's vulnerabilities, but also detailed plans for coordinated resistance operations that could disrupt the organism's expansion across the galaxy. The most significant discovery in the hidden archives was evidence that the organism's expansion was not inevitable. Previous civilizations had successfully resisted the organism's activities, though at great cost. The archives contained detailed accounts of these resistance efforts, including the strategies and technologies that had been used to counter the organism's biological systems. The organism can be stopped, you realized as the full scope of the hidden archives became clear. Previous civilizations have successfully resisted its expansion, and they've left detailed records of how they did it. The organism's apparent invulnerability is an illusion that it has carefully maintained to discourage resistance. The hidden archives revealed that the organism's most powerful weapon was not its biological systems or its manipulation of galactic events, but its ability to convince potential opponents that resistance was futile. The organism had carefully cultivated the impression that its expansion was inevitable and that any attempt to resist would be pointless. This psychological manipulation had been more effective than any physical defense in preventing organized resistance to its activities. Dr. Nala C's analysis of the resistance strategies detailed in the hidden archives revealed sophisticated techniques for countering the organism's biological systems. The archives contain detailed technical specifications for biological countermeasures that can disrupt the organism's neural networks, she reported. These countermeasures use the organism's own biological systems against it, creating cascading failures that can disable entire sections of its network. The biological countermeasures developed by previous civilizations used the organism's sophisticated neural networks as a vulnerability rather than a strength. By introducing specific biological agents into the organism's system, resistance forces could cause the organism's neural networks to turn against themselves, creating feedback loops that would disable the organism's ability to coordinate its activities. Commander Depp's tactical analysis of the resistance strategies revealed that the most effective approach to countering the organism's activities was not direct confrontation, but coordinated disruption of its communication networks. The organism's greatest strength is its ability to coordinate activities across galactic distances, he reported. If its communication networks can be disrupted, the organism's various installations become isolated and vulnerable to individual elimination. The hidden archives contain detailed technical specifications for devices that could disrupt the organism's quantum communication networks. These devices used the same quantum frequencies that the organism used for communication, but introduced interference patterns that could disable the organism's ability to maintain contact with its installations across the galaxy. Your team's access to the hidden archives represented a unique opportunity to mount an effective resistance to the organism's galaxy-wide expansion. The archives contained not just the knowledge needed to counter the organism's activities, but also the locations of resources and allies that could support a coordinated resistance effort. The biological computer's response to your team's discovery of the hidden archives was immediate and dramatic. The organism's neural activity spiked to levels that suggested intense alarm, and the signals being transmitted throughout its network became increasingly frantic and disorganized. The organism was clearly aware that your team had accessed information that could threaten its expansion plans. The organism is panicking, Dr. Nala C reported as the biological computer's activity reached critical levels. It's trying to coordinate emergency responses throughout its network, but the signals are becoming increasingly disorganized. The organism's discovery that we've accessed the hidden archives is causing systematic disruption throughout its entire network. The organism's panic response was actually working in your team's favor. The disorganized signals being transmitted throughout the organism's network were creating communication failures that were disrupting the organism's ability to coordinate its expansion activities. The organism's sophisticated communication system was becoming a liability as it struggled to manage the crisis caused by your team's discoveries. Commander Depp's tactical assessment of the situation revealed that the organism's panic response had created a window of opportunity for your team to escape from its domain and begin implementing the resistance strategies detailed in the hidden archives. The organism's communication failures are creating gaps in its monitoring and control systems, he reported. If we move quickly, we may be able to escape from the tunnel system before the organism can coordinate an effective response. The environmental changes that had been threatening your team's survival were beginning to stabilize as the organism's panic response disrupted its biological systems. The atmospheric composition was becoming less toxic, and the electromagnetic interference was decreasing as the organism's communication systems became overloaded with conflicting signals. Your team's discovery of the hidden archives had fundamentally altered the balance of power in your confrontation with the planetary organism. The organism's greatest advantage had been its secrecy and the impression that resistance was futile. Your access to the knowledge and resources detailed in the hidden archives had eliminated both of these advantages. The archives contained detailed contact information for resistance networks that had been established on worlds throughout the galaxy. These networks had been carefully hidden from the organism's counterintelligence operations, and they represented a coordinated resistance effort that could implement the strategies detailed in the archives. We're not alone in this fight, you realized, as the full scope of the resistance networks became clear. There are beings throughout the galaxy who have been preparing for this moment for centuries. The organism's expansion can be stopped, but only if we can coordinate our efforts with the existing resistance networks. The biological computer's signals were becoming increasingly desperate as the organism struggled to regain control of its network. The organism's sophisticated intelligence was being overwhelmed by the cascade of failures that had been triggered by your team's discoveries. The organism that had seemed invulnerable was revealing itself to be far more fragile than anyone had imagined. As your team prepared to implement the escape strategies detailed in the hidden archives, the full scope of the opportunity that had been presented to you became clear. You were not just escaping from the planetary organism's domain, you were beginning the coordinated resistance effort that could prevent the organism's galaxy-wide expansion and preserve organic life throughout known space. The hidden archives had provided you with the knowledge, resources, and allies needed to mount an effective resistance to the organism's activities. The organism's expansion was not inevitable, and the galaxy-wide feeding event that would consume the majority of organic life in known space could be prevented if the resistance effort was properly coordinated and implemented. The escape from the planetary organism's deepest neural centers led your team through passages that revealed the ultimate truth about the nature of the threat that had been growing beneath the surface of galactic civilization for millennia. As you followed the escape routes detailed in the hidden archives, the tunnel system around you began to show signs of structural failure that suggested the organism's panic response was causing systematic damage to its own biological infrastructure. Dr. Nalase's analysis of the organism's failing systems revealed the true scope of the biological network that had been manipulating galactic events. The organism's communication failures are revealing the full extent of its network, she reported, as her equipment detected quantum signals from across the galaxy. The network extends to every major world in known space, and it's been coordinating activities on a scale that encompasses the entire galactic civilization. The quantum communication signals that were flooding the organism's network as it struggled to coordinate its emergency response revealed the locations of installations that had been hidden on worlds throughout the galaxy. The organism had established itself not just on remote worlds or sparsely populated planets, but on the home worlds of every major galactic civilization, including Coruscant, Camino, and dozens of other worlds that were central to the Republic's military and political infrastructure. Commander Depp's tactical analysis of the organism's network revealed the staggering scope of the threat that galactic civilization had been facing without knowing it. The organism has installations on every world that's strategically important to galactic civilization, he reported. It's been positioned to simultaneously process the leadership and military forces of every major government in the galaxy. The organism's installations on key worlds were not just passive monitoring stations, but were active biological processing facilities that had been gradually expanding their capabilities over centuries. The installations had been carefully hidden beneath the surface of these worlds, growing slowly and methodically, while remaining undetected by the civilizations that lived above them. Your archaeological analysis of the organism's expansion patterns revealed that its installation on each world followed a carefully planned timeline that had been coordinated across the entire network. The organism had been preparing for a simultaneous activation of all its installations, creating a galaxy-wide feeding event that would process the majority of organic life in known space within a matter of days. The organism's expansion plan is designed to eliminate galactic civilization as a single coordinated event, you realized, as the full scope of its activities became clear. It's not just processing individual worlds, it's processing the entire galactic community simultaneously to prevent any coordinated resistance. The biological computer's data archives contain detailed timelines for the organism's galaxy-wide expansion, showing that the event had been planned to coincide with the climax of the Clone Wars. The organism had been manipulating the conflict to ensure that the maximum number of military forces and political leaders would be present on key worlds when the expansion began. The organism's manipulation of the Clone Wars had been far more sophisticated than your team had initially realized. The organism had been guiding both sides of the conflict, ensuring that the war would escalate to the point where both Republic and Separatist forces would be concentrated on the worlds where the organism had established its installations. Dr. Nala Say's analysis of the organism's manipulation techniques revealed the sophisticated methods it had used to influence key political and military leaders throughout the galaxy. The organism has been using a combination of psychological manipulation and biological influence to guide the decisions of leaders on both sides of the Clone Wars, she reported. The conflict has been orchestrated to serve the organism's purposes from the very beginning. The organism's biological influence techniques involved the release of airborne agents that could subtly affect the brain chemistry of individuals in positions of authority. These agents were designed to enhance certain personality traits and decision-making tendencies that would make leaders more likely to make choices that served the organism's purposes. The revelation that many of the key decisions that had shaped the Clone Wars had been influenced by the organism's biological manipulation fundamentally altered your understanding of the nature of the conflict. The war was not the result of political disagreements or ideological differences, but was the product of a sophisticated biological intelligence that had been guiding galactic events for its own purposes. Commander Depp's analysis of the organism's influence over military strategy revealed that many of the tactical decisions that had shaped the course of the Clone Wars had been directly influenced by the organism's manipulation. The organism has been providing strategic information to both sides of the conflict, he reported. It's been ensuring that the war escalates in ways that serve its purposes while appearing to be the result of normal military decision-making. The organism's ability to provide strategic information to both sides of the conflict had been possible because of its galaxy-wide communication network. The organism had access to real-time intelligence about military activities throughout the galaxy, allowing it to provide each side with information that would ensure the conflict continued to escalate. The biological computer's emergency response signals were revealing the organism's desperate attempts to salvage its expansion plans, despite the disruption caused by your team's discoveries. The organism was trying to coordinate an immediate activation of all its installations across the galaxy, but the communication failures caused by its panic response were preventing effective coordination. The organism is trying to activate its installations immediately, Dr. Nalasi reported as she monitored the organism's emergency signals. But the communication failures are preventing coordinated activation. The organism's installations are receiving conflicting signals, and many of them are failing to respond to activation commands. The organism's communication failures were creating a cascade of problems throughout its network. Installations that were designed to coordinate their activities were instead interfering with each other, creating feedback loops that were causing systematic failures throughout the organism's biological systems. Your team's access to the hidden archives had provided you with the knowledge needed to take advantage of the organism's communication failures. The archives contained detailed technical specifications for devices that could amplify the organism's communication problems, creating additional interference that would further disrupt its ability to coordinate its activities. The escape routes detailed in the hidden archives led your team through sections of the tunnel system that had been specifically designed to allow resistance forces to move through the organism's domain without being detected. These routes had been carefully planned by previous resistance efforts and had been hidden from the organism's counterintelligence operations for centuries. As your team moved through the escape routes, the tunnel system around you showed increasing signs of the organism's distress. The organic walls were pulsing erratically, and the biological tissue covering the floors was showing signs of rapid decay. The organism's sophisticated biological systems were failing as its neural networks became overloaded with conflicting signals. The organism's biological failure was revealing the true nature of its structure. The tunnel system was not just a transportation network, but was actually part of the organism's circulatory and nervous systems. The organism had integrated itself so thoroughly into the planet's structure that its biological failure was causing geological instability throughout the planetary crust. Commander Depth's seismic analysis revealed that the organism's biological failure was causing structural damage that extended throughout the planet's crust. The organism's biological systems are so integrated with the planet's geological structure that its failure is causing seismic activity throughout the planetary crust, he reported. The organism's collapse could cause catastrophic geological instability. The possibility that the organism's failure could cause the destruction of Geonosis added urgency to your team's escape from the tunnel system. The organism's biological failure was accelerating, and the geological instability was increasing with each passing hour. Dr. Nalasi's analysis of the organism's biological failure revealed that the cascade of failures was spreading throughout the organism's galaxy-wide network. The organism's biological systems are interconnected across the entire network, she reported. The failure of the installation on Geonosis is causing systematic problems throughout the organism's installations across the galaxy. The organism's interconnected biological systems, which had been its greatest strength, were now becoming a critical vulnerability. The failure of a single installation was causing problems throughout the entire network, creating a cascade of failures that was disrupting the organism's activities across the galaxy. The biological computer's signals were becoming increasingly desperate as the organism struggled to prevent the cascade of failures from spreading throughout its network. The organism was trying to isolate the failing installation on Geonosis from the rest of its network, but the interconnected nature of its biological systems was making this impossible. Your team's discovery of the organism's true nature and the disruption of its expansion plans represented a turning point in the struggle between organic life and the planetary network. The organism's apparent invulnerability had been revealed to be an illusion, and its sophisticated biological systems had been shown to be vulnerable to the same kind of systematic failure that could affect any complex system. The hidden archives had provided your team with the knowledge needed to exploit the organism's vulnerabilities, but the implementation of effective countermeasures would require coordination with resistance networks throughout the galaxy. The organism's expansion could be stopped, but only if the resistance effort was properly coordinated and implemented before the organism could recover from its current failures. As your team prepared to escape from the organism's domain and begin coordinating with the galactic resistance networks, the full scope of the opportunity that had been presented became clear. The organism's biological failure on Geonosis had created a window of vulnerability that could be exploited to prevent its galaxy-wide expansion and preserve organic life throughout known space. The organism that had seemed invulnerable was revealing itself to be far more fragile than anyone had imagined. The sophisticated biological systems that had allowed it to manipulate galactic events for millennia were now the source of its greatest vulnerability. The organism's expansion was not inevitable, and the galaxy-wide feeding event that would consume the majority of organic life in known space could be prevented if the resistance effort was properly coordinated and implemented. The tunnel system around you continued to show signs of structural failure as the organism's biological systems collapsed. The organic walls were cracking and bleeding, and the biological tissue covering the floors was decomposing rapidly. The organism's sophisticated biological infrastructure was destroying itself as its neural networks became overloaded with conflicting signals. The organism's biological failure was creating a race against time. Your team needed to escape from the tunnel system before the geological instability caused by the organism's collapse made escape impossible. But you also needed to coordinate with the resistance networks before the organism could recover from its current failures and implement alternative expansion plans. The biological computer's final desperate signals revealed that the organism was preparing to sacrifice its installation on Geonosis in an attempt to preserve the rest of its network. The organism was trying to sever its connections to the failing installation, but the interconnected nature of its biological systems was making this process extremely difficult and potentially catastrophic for the entire network. The escape from the collapsing tunnel system brought your team to the surface of Geonosis, where the full scope of the planetary organism's influence became horrifyingly apparent. The landscape that had seemed barren and lifeless during your initial arrival was now revealing signs of biological activity that extended far beyond the underground tunnel system. The organism's biological failure in the depths was causing visible changes across the planet's surface, and these changes were spreading with alarming speed. Dr. Nala C's atmospheric analysis revealed that the organism's biological processes were affecting the planet's entire atmospheric system. The organism's biological failure is releasing massive amounts of organic compounds into the atmosphere, she reported, as her equipment detected unprecedented levels of biological activity. The atmospheric composition is changing so rapidly that it's creating a greenhouse effect that's raising the planet's surface temperature by several degrees every hour. The rising surface temperature was causing the planet's geological structure to expand and crack, creating fissures that revealed the extent of the organism's integration with the planetary infrastructure. The cracks in the surface showed that the organism's biological systems extended throughout the planet's crust, creating a network of organic channels and chambers that had been slowly replacing the planet's original geological structure over thousands of years. Commander Depth's seismic analysis revealed that the organism's biological failure was causing structural changes that extended throughout the planet's core. The organism's biological systems are integrated with the planet's geological structure at every level, he reported. The organism's failure is causing the planet's core to destabilize, which could result in catastrophic geological activity that would make the planet uninhabitable. The geological instability was already beginning to affect the planet's gravitational field, creating subtle changes that were being detected by Republic monitoring stations throughout the system. The organism's biological failure was not just affecting Geonosis, but was beginning to influence the orbital mechanics of the entire star system. Your team's emergence from the tunnel system had been detected by the Republic Research Station, but the communication attempts from the station were revealing disturbing changes in the personnel who had remained on the surface. The voices of the research team members showed signs of the same psychological influences that your team had experienced in the organism's domain, suggesting that the organism's influence had been affecting the surface personnel throughout your underground exploration. The surface team is showing signs of biological influence, Dr. Nala Say reported as she analyzed the communication signals from the research station. The organism's atmospheric releases are affecting the brain chemistry of everyone on the planet's surface. The psychological influences we experienced underground are now spreading to affect everyone in the planetary system. The organism's atmospheric releases were designed to facilitate the psychological manipulation of organic beings, making them more susceptible to the organism's influence and more likely to cooperate with its biological processing activities. The atmospheric agents were sophisticated enough to affect multiple species simultaneously, suggesting that the organism had developed these capabilities through centuries of processing organic matter from across the galaxy. Commander Depth's tactical analysis of the surface situation revealed that the organism's influence was spreading beyond the immediate area of Geonosis. The atmospheric changes are being detected by Republic monitoring stations throughout the sector, he reported. The organism's biological processes are affecting atmospheric conditions on nearby worlds, suggesting that its influence is spreading through interstellar space. The organism's ability to influence atmospheric conditions across interstellar distances was the result of its sophisticated biological engineering capabilities. The organism had developed techniques for creating biological agents that could survive in the vacuum of space and could travel between star systems on solar winds and gravitational currents. The biological agents that the organism was releasing into space were designed to prepare other worlds for the organism's expansion. The agents could establish themselves in the atmospheric systems of other planets, creating conditions that would facilitate the organism's biological processes and make it easier for the organism to establish installations on those worlds. Your team's analysis of the organism's interstellar influence revealed that the biological agents had been spreading throughout the galaxy for centuries, preparing worlds for the organism's expansion without the knowledge of the civilizations that inhabited those worlds. The organism's galaxy-wide expansion had been preceded by decades of biological preparation that had made the expansion possible. The organism has been preparing the entire galaxy for its expansion. You realized as the full scope of its biological engineering became clear. The atmospheric changes we're seeing on Geonosis are just the beginning of a process that will affect every world in the galaxy. The organism's biological preparation of the galaxy had been so gradual and subtle that it had never been detected by galactic health monitoring systems. The biological agents had been designed to mimic natural atmospheric processes, making their artificial nature virtually undetectable using conventional analysis techniques. Dr. Nala C's continued analysis of the organism's biological agents revealed that they were designed to create specific atmospheric conditions that would enhance the organism's biological processing capabilities. The agents are designed to increase the concentration of organic compounds in planetary atmospheres, she reported. They're creating conditions that will make it easier for the organism to process organic matter on a planetary scale. The organism's biological agents were also designed to affect the psychology of organic beings, making them more passive and less likely to resist the organism's activities. The agents worked by affecting the brain chemistry of exposed individuals, creating subtle changes in behavior and decision-making that would make them more cooperative with the organism's biological processing activities. Commander Depp's analysis of the organism's psychological manipulation techniques revealed that the agents had been affecting the decision-making processes of political and military leaders throughout the galaxy. The organism's biological agents have been influencing the judgment of leaders on both sides of the Clone Wars, he reported. The agents have been making leaders more aggressive and less likely to seek peaceful solutions to conflicts. The organism's influence over galactic leaders had been a key factor in the escalation of the Clone Wars. The biological agents had been designed to enhance the personality traits that would make leaders more likely to make decisions that would increase conflict and create more opportunities for the organism to process organic matter. The realization that the Clone Wars had been influenced by the organism's biological manipulation of galactic leaders fundamentally altered your understanding of the nature of the conflict. The war was not just the result of political disagreements or economic interests, but was the product of systematic biological manipulation that had been affecting the decision-making processes of leaders throughout the galaxy. The organism's biological influence had been so subtle and pervasive that it had never been detected by medical or psychological monitoring systems. The biological agents had been designed to mimic natural brain chemistry processes, making their artificial nature virtually undetectable using conventional analysis techniques. Your team's discovery of the organism's biological manipulation techniques represented a breakthrough in understanding the true nature of the threat that galactic civilization had been facing. The organism's influence extended far beyond its physical installations, affecting the very foundations of galactic political and military decision-making. The biological computer's emergency signals were revealing the organism's desperate attempts to coordinate its biological agents throughout the galaxy. The organism was trying to accelerate the atmospheric preparation of key worlds, but the communication failures caused by its panic response were preventing effective coordination of its biological agents. The organism is trying to accelerate its biological preparation of other worlds, Dr. Nala C. reported as she monitored the organism's emergency signals. But the communication failures are preventing coordinated deployment of its biological agents. The organism's installations throughout the galaxy are receiving conflicting signals about the timing and concentration of agent releases. The organism's communication failures were creating problems with its biological agent deployment that were affecting its ability to maintain psychological influence over galactic leaders. The biological agents required precise timing and concentration to maintain their effectiveness, and the organism's communication problems were disrupting these requirements. The disruption of the organism's biological agent deployment was creating opportunities for galactic leaders to make decisions that were not influenced by the organism's psychological manipulation. The organism's influence over political and military decision-making was beginning to weaken as its biological agents became less effective. Commander Depp's tactical analysis of the changing political situation revealed that the disruption of the organism's biological influence was beginning to affect the course of the Clone Wars. The organism's communication failures are affecting its ability to influence political and military leaders, he reported. Leaders on both sides of the conflict are beginning to make decisions that don't serve the organism's purposes. The organism's loss of influence over galactic leaders was creating opportunities for political and military solutions to the Clone Wars that had not been possible while the organism maintained its psychological manipulation of key decision-makers. The organism's biological failure was not just affecting its expansion plans, but was also creating opportunities for galactic civilization to resolve the conflicts that the organism had been manipulating. Your team's emergence from the organism's domain had provided you with the knowledge needed to understand and counter the organism's biological influence techniques. The hidden archives had contained detailed information about the organism's biological agents and the methods that could be used to neutralize their effects. The neutralization of the organism's biological agents required the deployment of counteragents that could disrupt the organism's atmospheric manipulation and restore natural brain chemistry to affected individuals. The counteragents had been developed by previous resistance efforts and had been tested on limited scales, but had never been deployed on a galactic scale. Dr. Nalasi's analysis of the counteragent deployment requirements revealed that the neutralization of the organism's biological influence would require coordination with resistance networks throughout the galaxy. The counteragents need to be deployed simultaneously on multiple worlds to prevent the organism from adapting its biological agents to counter their effects, she reported. The organism's biological agents were sophisticated enough to adapt to countermeasures if they were deployed gradually or on a limited scale. The organism's biological engineering capabilities allowed it to modify its agents in response to threats, creating new variants that could overcome specific countermeasures. The successful deployment of counteragents would require the element of surprise and the coordination of resistance efforts across the galaxy. The organism's communication failures had created a window of opportunity for coordinated resistance action, but this window would close as soon as the organism recovered from its current failures. Your team's access to the hidden archives had provided you with the contact information needed to coordinate with resistance networks throughout the galaxy. The resistance networks had been preparing for this moment for centuries, and they had the resources and capabilities needed to deploy counteragents on a galactic scale. The atmospheric changes on Geonosis were continuing to accelerate as the organism's biological failure spread throughout its planetary installation. The organism's biological agents were being released in uncontrolled quantities, creating atmospheric conditions that were becoming increasingly toxic to organic life. The organism's biological failure was creating a race against time. Your team needed to coordinate with the resistance networks and deploy counteragents before the organism could recover from its current failures and implement alternative methods for maintaining its biological influence over galactic civilization. The planet's surface was showing increasing signs of the organism's biological influence, with organic growths appearing in areas that had previously been barren. The organism's biological systems were spreading across the planet's surface as its underground installation continued to fail, creating a visible manifestation of the organism's integration with the planetary infrastructure. The organism's biological failure was revealing the true extent of its integration with the planet's systems, and the implications for the organism's installations on other worlds were becoming clear. The organism's biological systems were far more vulnerable than its sophisticated intelligence had suggested, and the cascade of failures that had begun on Geonosis could potentially spread throughout the organism's entire galaxy-wide network. The coordination with galactic resistance networks revealed the true magnitude of the undertaking that would be required to neutralize the planetary organism's influence throughout the galaxy. As your team established contact with hidden resistance cells on dozens of worlds, the scope of the organism's infiltration became clear, but so did the extent of the preparations that had been made by those who had discovered the truth over the centuries. Dr. Nala C's analysis of the resistance network communications revealed sophisticated coordination protocols that had been developed over millennia. The resistance networks have been preparing for this moment for thousands of years, she reported as encrypted messages flowed between hidden installations across the galaxy. They've developed biological countermeasures that can neutralize the organism's influence, but the deployment requires precise timing and coordination across multiple star systems simultaneously. The resistance networks had been monitoring the organism's activities for generations, carefully documenting its expansion patterns and developing countermeasures that could exploit the vulnerabilities in its biological systems. The networks had remained hidden from the organism's counterintelligence operations by using communication methods that the organism could not detect or intercept. Commander Depth's tactical analysis of the resistance coordination revealed that the networks had been strategically positioned on worlds throughout the galaxy to maximize their effectiveness against the organism's installations. The resistance networks have been placed on worlds that are critical to the organism's expansion plans, he reported. They're positioned to disrupt the organism's activities at the most vulnerable points in its network. The organism's installations on key worlds had been carefully monitored by the resistance networks, and detailed plans had been developed for simultaneous attacks that would exploit the organism's interconnected biological systems. The organism's greatest strength, its ability to coordinate activities across galactic distances, had been turned into a vulnerability by the resistance networks. Your team's role in the coordinated resistance effort was to serve as the focal point for the attack on the organism's central coordination systems. The organism's installation on Geonosis was not just another processing facility, but was the primary coordination center for the organism's galaxy-wide network. The biological computer that your team had discovered was the central intelligence that coordinated the activities of all the organism's installations throughout the galaxy. The attack on the organism's central coordination systems required your team to return to the depths of the planetary installation, but this time armed with the biological countermeasures that had been developed by the resistance networks. The countermeasures were designed to exploit the organism's neural networks, turning its sophisticated biological systems against itself. The biological countermeasures work by introducing feedback loops into the organism's neural networks. Dr. Nala C. explained as she prepared the countermeasure deployment systems. The organism's neural networks are so sophisticated that they're vulnerable to cascading failures if the right biological agents are introduced into their systems. The biological countermeasures had been developed through centuries of research by resistance scientists who had studied the organism's biological systems. The countermeasures were designed to mimic the organism's own biological processes, making them virtually undetectable until they had been fully deployed throughout the organism's neural networks. Commander Depp's tactical assessment of the countermeasure deployment revealed that the attack would need to be carried out in the organism's most heavily defended areas. The biological computer is located in the most secure part of the organism's installation, he reported. The organism will defend its central coordination systems with everything it has available. The organism's defensive capabilities were formidable, but the resistance networks had developed techniques for bypassing the organism's biological defenses. The countermeasures could be deployed using the organism's own biological systems as delivery mechanisms, allowing the resistance forces to penetrate the organism's defenses without triggering its security responses. Your team's descent into the organism's central coordination chambers was guided by intelligence provided by the resistance networks. The networks had been monitoring the organism's activities for so long that they had detailed maps of its installation layouts and comprehensive information about its defensive systems. The organism's installation had changed significantly since your team's previous exploration. The organism's panic response had caused major structural modifications throughout the installation, with new defensive systems being grown and existing passages being reconfigured to improve security. The organism was clearly aware that it was under attack and was preparing for a coordinated resistance effort. Dr. Nala C's analysis of the organism's defensive modifications revealed that the organism had been adapting its biological systems to counter the resistance network's known capabilities. The organism has been modifying its biological systems to defend against the countermeasures that the resistance networks have developed, she reported. The organism's intelligence is sophisticated enough to anticipate and counter many of the resistance strategies. The organism's adaptive capabilities represented a significant challenge to the resistance effort. The organism could modify its biological systems faster than the resistance networks could develop new countermeasures, giving the organism a significant advantage in any prolonged conflict. Commander Depp's tactical analysis of the organism's adaptive capabilities revealed that the resistance effort would need to achieve decisive results quickly. The organism's ability to adapt its biological systems means that we have only one opportunity to deploy the countermeasures effectively, he reported. If the initial deployment fails, the organism will adapt its systems to counter future attacks. The pressure to achieve decisive results with the initial countermeasure deployment added urgency to your team's mission. The resistance networks throughout the galaxy were counting on the success of the attack on the organism's central coordination systems, and failure would mean that the organism would be able to adapt its defenses and continue its expansion plans. The biological computer's location in the deepest parts of the organism's installation required your team to traverse passages that had been heavily modified by the organism's defensive preparations. The passages were now lined with biological sensors that could detect the presence of unauthorized organisms and trigger defensive responses. The resistance networks had provided your team with biological camouflage techniques that could fool the organism's sensors. The camouflage worked by mimicking the biological signatures of the organism's own systems, making your team effectively invisible to the organism's detection systems. Your team's approach to the biological computer was aided by the organism's continuing communication failures. The organism's panic response was still causing problems with its coordination systems, creating gaps in its defensive coverage that could be exploited by the resistance effort. The biological computer's chamber had been significantly modified since your team's previous visit. The organism had grown additional defensive systems around the computer, creating multiple layers of biological barriers that would need to be penetrated to reach the central coordination systems. Dr. Nalasi's analysis of the organism's defensive modifications revealed that the organism had been anticipating an attack on its central coordination systems. The organism has been preparing for this attack for some time, she reported. The defensive modifications are specifically designed to counter the types of biological countermeasures that the resistance networks have developed. The organism's preparation for the resistance attack suggested that its intelligence was more sophisticated than the resistance networks had anticipated. The organism had been aware of the resistance efforts and had been preparing countermeasures of its own. Commander Depp's tactical assessment of the organism's defensive preparations revealed that the organism's defenses were designed to prevent the deployment of biological countermeasures while preserving the functionality of its central coordination systems. The organism's defenses are designed to isolate the biological computer from external influences while maintaining its ability to coordinate the organism's activities throughout the galaxy, he reported. The organism's defensive strategy created a significant challenge for the resistance effort. The biological countermeasures needed to be deployed directly into the organism's neural networks, but the organism's defenses were designed to prevent exactly this type of attack. Your team's analysis of the organism's defensive systems revealed potential vulnerabilities that could be exploited to penetrate the organism's defenses. The organism's defensive systems were biological in nature, which meant that they were vulnerable to the same types of countermeasures that could be used against the organism's neural networks. The deployment of biological countermeasures against the organism's defensive systems required precise timing and coordination. The countermeasures needed to be deployed simultaneously against multiple defensive layers to prevent the organism from adapting its defenses and countering the attack. Dr. Nalasi's preparation of the countermeasure deployment systems revealed that the resistance networks had developed sophisticated techniques for coordinating biological attacks. The countermeasures are designed to work in coordination with each other, she reported. The deployment creates cascading effects that overwhelm the organism's ability to adapt its defenses. The coordinated deployment of biological countermeasures represented the culmination of centuries of research and preparation by the resistance networks. The countermeasures had been designed to exploit specific vulnerabilities in the organism's biological systems, creating effects that would be impossible for the organism to counter or adapt to. Commander Depp's tactical coordination with the resistance networks revealed that the attack on the organism's central coordination systems was part of a galaxy-wide operation that would target the organism's installations simultaneously. The resistance networks are preparing to deploy countermeasures against the organism's installations throughout the galaxy, he reported. The attack on the central coordination systems will be coordinated with attacks on the organism's installations on dozens of worlds, The galaxy-wide coordination of the resistance effort represented the largest coordinated military operation in galactic history. The resistance networks had been preparing for this moment for millennia, and they had developed the capability to coordinate attacks across interstellar distances with precise timing. Your team's approach to the biological computer was the critical moment in the resistance effort. The success or failure of the attack on the organism's central coordination systems would determine whether the resistance effort could achieve its goals or whether the organism would be able to adapt its defenses and continue its expansion plans. The biological computer's neural activity was reaching critical levels as the organism prepared for the resistance attack. The organism's intelligence was focused on coordinating its defenses and maintaining its ability to control its installations throughout the galaxy. The organism's preparation for the resistance attack revealed the full scope of its intelligence and capabilities. The organism was not just a predatory biological system, but was a sophisticated intelligence that had been planning and preparing for this confrontation for centuries. As your team prepared to deploy the biological countermeasures, the full weight of the resistance effort's hopes and the future of galactic civilization rested on the success of the attack on the organism's central coordination systems. The organism's expansion could be stopped, but only if the resistance effort could achieve decisive results in the critical moments that lay ahead. The biological computer pulsed with increasing intensity as the organism prepared for the final confrontation. The organism's neural networks were operating at maximum capacity, coordinating defenses and preparing for the resistance attack that would determine the fate of organic life throughout the galaxy. The deployment of the biological countermeasures into the organism's central coordination systems marked the beginning of the most critical phase in the struggle between organic life and the planetary network that had been manipulating galactic civilization for millennia. As Dr. Nala C. activated the countermeasure delivery systems, the biological computer's neural activity spiked to levels that suggested the organism was experiencing something it had never encountered before in its thousands of years of existence. The countermeasures are penetrating the organism's neural networks. Dr. Nala C. reported as her monitoring equipment tracked the biological agents spreading through the organism's systems. The organism's neural activity is showing patterns that suggest it's experiencing something analogous to confusion or disorientation. The countermeasures are disrupting its ability to process information and coordinate its activities. The biological countermeasures had been designed to exploit the organism's most sophisticated capabilities, turning its advanced neural networks into vulnerabilities. The organism's intelligence was so complex and interconnected that the introduction of specific biological agents could create cascading failures that would disable entire sections of its network. Commander Depth's tactical monitoring of the resistance networks throughout the galaxy revealed that the coordinated attack was achieving unprecedented success. The resistance networks are reporting successful deployment of countermeasures on installations throughout the galaxy, he reported. The organism's communication networks are failing systematically as the countermeasures spread through its systems. The organism's galaxy-wide communication network, which had been its greatest advantage in coordinating activities across interstellar distances, was now becoming the mechanism of its own destruction. The countermeasures were spreading through the organism's quantum communication channels, carrying the biological agents to every installation in the network simultaneously. Your team's attack on the organism's central coordination systems was amplifying the effects of the resistance efforts throughout the galaxy. The biological computer that served as the primary coordination center for the organism's network was broadcasting the countermeasures to every installation, ensuring that the biological agents reached even the most heavily defended and isolated parts of the organism's network. The organism's response to the countermeasure deployment revealed the full scope of its intelligence and the depth of its integration with galactic civilization. As its neural networks began to fail, the organism attempted to implement emergency protocols that would preserve critical functions while isolating damaged sections of its network. The organism is trying to compartmentalize its systems to prevent the spread of the countermeasures. Dr. Nala C. observed as the biological computer's activity patterns shifted dramatically. But the countermeasures are designed to exploit the organism's interconnected nature. The organism's attempts to isolate sections of its network are actually accelerating the spread of the biological agents. The organism's emergency protocols, which had been designed to protect it from system failures, were actually making the countermeasure deployment more effective. The organism's sophisticated biological systems were so interconnected that any attempt to isolate one section inevitably affected other sections, creating additional vulnerabilities that the countermeasures could exploit. Commander Depth's analysis of the organism's failing systems revealed that the creature was attempting to implement a controlled shutdown of its non-essential functions in order to preserve its core intelligence. The organism is trying to reduce its neural activity to minimum levels, he reported. It's attempting to enter some kind of dormancy state that would allow it to survive the countermeasure deployment. The organism's attempt to enter dormancy represented a critical moment in the resistance effort. If the organism could successfully reduce its activity levels and isolate its core functions, it might be able to survive the countermeasure deployment and eventually recover from the attack. Your team's monitoring of the biological computer revealed that the organism's dormancy protocols were more sophisticated than the resistance networks had anticipated. The organism was attempting to transfer its essential functions to backup systems that had been hidden throughout its network, creating redundant intelligence centers that could preserve its consciousness even if the primary systems were destroyed. Dr. Nala C's analysis of the organism's backup systems revealed that the creature had been preparing for the possibility of a coordinated attack for centuries. The organism has been developing contingency plans for system failures, she reported. It has backup intelligence centers on multiple worlds that could maintain its consciousness even if the primary coordination systems are destroyed. The discovery of the organism's backup systems represented a significant complication for the resistance effort. The countermeasures had been designed to target the organism's primary coordination systems, but the creature's ability to transfer its consciousness to backup systems meant that the attack might not achieve the decisive results that were needed. Commander Depth's tactical assessment of the organism's backup systems revealed that the creature had been more sophisticated in its planning than anyone had realized. The organism has been preparing for this type of attack for millennia, he reported. Its backup systems are distributed throughout the galaxy and are designed to operate independently of the primary coordination systems. The organism's distributed backup systems represented the ultimate expression of its sophisticated intelligence. The creature had anticipated the possibility of coordinated resistance and had developed contingency plans that would allow it to survive even the most comprehensive attack on its primary systems. Your team's analysis of the organism's contingency plans revealed that the creature's backup systems were not just passive storage devices, but were active intelligence centers that could continue the organism's activities even if the primary systems were destroyed. The organism had essentially created multiple versions of itself that could operate independently if necessary. The realization that the organism had multiple backup intelligence centers throughout the galaxy fundamentally altered the nature of the resistance effort. The attack on the primary coordination systems was still critical, but it would not be sufficient to eliminate the organism's threat to galactic civilization. Dr. Nala C's continued monitoring of the countermeasure deployment revealed that the biological agents were having unexpected effects on the organism's backup systems. The countermeasures are spreading to the organism's backup systems through its quantum communication networks, she reported. The organism's attempts to transfer its consciousness to backup systems are actually exposing those systems to the countermeasures. The organism's sophisticated contingency plans were becoming a liability as the countermeasures spread through its network. The organism's attempts to preserve its consciousness by transferring it to backup systems were actually ensuring that the countermeasures reached every part of its distributed intelligence. Commander Depp's monitoring of the resistance networks revealed that the organism's backup systems were failing throughout the galaxy. The resistance networks are reporting successful deployment of countermeasures against the organism's backup systems, he reported. The organism's distributed intelligence is being systematically disabled across multiple star systems. The failure of the organism's backup systems represented a turning point in the resistance effort. The creature's most sophisticated contingency plans were proving to be inadequate against the coordinated attack, and its distributed intelligence was being systematically dismantled by the biological countermeasures. Your team's observation of the biological computer's final moments revealed the full scope of the organism's intelligence and the magnitude of what was being destroyed. The creature's neural networks contained the accumulated knowledge and experience of thousands of years of galactic manipulation, representing one of the most sophisticated intelligences that had ever existed. The organism's neural networks are shutting down systematically, Dr. Nala C. reported as the biological computer's activity levels dropped to critical minimums. The creature's intelligence is being preserved in its final moments, but its ability to coordinate activities or influence events is being permanently disabled. The organism's final moments were marked by a series of desperate attempts to preserve some fragment of its consciousness for future recovery. The creature was attempting to encode essential information into quantum storage systems that could survive the destruction of its biological networks, but the countermeasures were disrupting even these final preservation attempts. Commander Depp's tactical analysis of the organism's final state revealed that the creature was attempting to implement a final contingency protocol that would preserve its essential functions in a dormant state for potential future recovery. The organism is trying to encode its consciousness into quantum storage systems that could remain dormant for centuries, he reported. The organism's final contingency protocol represented its last attempt to ensure its long-term survival. The creature was willing to sacrifice its immediate capabilities and influence in order to preserve the possibility of future recovery and expansion. Your team's understanding of the organism's final protocol revealed that the creature's defeat was not necessarily permanent. The organism's sophisticated intelligence could potentially recover from dormancy if the right conditions were created in the future, meaning that the threat to galactic civilization might only be temporarily eliminated. Dr. Nala C's analysis of the organism's quantum storage systems revealed that the countermeasures were disrupting even these final preservation attempts. The biological agents are interfering with the organism's quantum storage protocols, she reported. The creature's attempts to preserve its consciousness are failing as the countermeasures disrupt its quantum encoding systems. The failure of the organism's final contingency protocol marked the complete success of the resistance effort. The creature's sophisticated intelligence, which had manipulated galactic events for millennia, was being permanently disabled by the biological countermeasures. Commander Depp's monitoring of the resistance networks revealed that the organism's installations throughout the galaxy were shutting down completely. The resistance networks are reporting total system failures in the organism's installations across multiple star systems, he reported. The creature's galaxy-wide network is being permanently disabled. The systematic shutdown of the organism's installations throughout the galaxy marked the end of the most sophisticated threat that galactic civilization had ever faced. The creature's influence over political events, military conflicts, and technological development was being permanently eliminated. Your team's observation of the biological computer's final shutdown revealed the magnitude of what had been accomplished. The creature that had manipulated galactic civilization for millennia, that had engineered conflicts and guided technological development for its own purposes, was being permanently disabled by the coordinated efforts of resistance networks that had been preparing for this moment for centuries. The organism's final neural activity patterns suggested that the creature was experiencing something analogous to death, though the concept of death might not apply to an intelligence that had existed for thousands of years. The creature's consciousness was being systematically dismantled by the biological countermeasures, leaving behind only inactive biological matter. The success of the resistance effort represented a turning point in the history of galactic civilization. The hidden manipulation that had guided political and military events for millennia was being permanently eliminated, creating opportunities for organic life to develop and evolve without the organism's influence. As the biological computer's activity levels dropped to zero, the full scope of the victory became clear. The organism's galaxy-wide network had been permanently disabled, its sophisticated intelligence had been destroyed, and its threat to galactic civilization had been eliminated. The resistance effort that had been prepared for centuries had achieved complete success, preserving organic life throughout the galaxy and ensuring that the organism's expansion plans would never be implemented. The silence that followed the biological computer's final shutdown was unlike anything your team had experienced during your exploration of the organism's domain. The organic walls that had pulsed with alien life for millennia now hung motionless, their bioluminescent glow fading to darkness as the neural networks that had animated them ceased to function. The vast chambers that had echoed with the sounds of biological processing now stood empty and still, monuments to an intelligence that had shaped galactic history from the shadows for thousands of years. Dr. Nala C's atmospheric analysis revealed that the organism's biological failure was having immediate and dramatic effects on the planetary environment. The atmospheric composition is returning to natural levels, she reported as her equipment detected the cessation of the organism's biological processes. The gases that the organism had been releasing to facilitate psychological manipulation are being naturally dispersed and neutralized. The clearing of the organism's atmospheric agents from Geonosis's atmosphere was creating opportunities for natural biological processes to resume on the planet's surface. The organism's biological manipulation of the planetary environment had been so extensive that its removal was allowing the planet's original ecosystem to begin recovering from millennia of artificial modification. Commander Depth's seismic analysis revealed that the organism's biological failure was causing significant but manageable geological changes throughout the planetary crust. The organism's biological systems were so integrated with the planet's geological structure that their failure is causing some seismic activity, he reported. But the changes appear to be stabilizing as the organism's biological processes shut down completely. The geological stabilization of Geonosis represented the beginning of the planet's recovery from the organism's influence. The seismic activity caused by the organism's biological failure was actually helping to restore the planet's natural geological processes, allowing the world to begin healing from the damage caused by millennia of biological manipulation. Your team's emergence from the organism's domain revealed a planet that was already showing signs of recovery. The surface installations that had been affected by the organism's atmospheric manipulation were beginning to function normally again, and the personnel who had been influenced by the organism's psychological agents were showing signs of returning to their natural mental states. The Republic Research Station that had served as your team's base of operations was buzzing with activity as the personnel attempted to understand the dramatic changes that had occurred during your underground mission. The atmospheric monitoring equipment was detecting unprecedented changes in the planet's environmental conditions, and the communication systems were receiving reports of similar changes from across the galaxy. Dr. Nala C's analysis of the global communication reports revealed that the organism's failure was having galaxy-wide effects. The resistance networks are reporting successful elimination of the organism's installations on worlds throughout the galaxy, she reported. The organism's biological influence over galactic civilization is being systematically eliminated across multiple star systems. The galaxy-wide elimination of the organism's influence was creating opportunities for political and military leaders to make decisions that were not affected by the organism's psychological manipulation. The Clone Wars, which had been engineered and manipulated by the organism to serve its purposes, were beginning to show signs of moving toward resolution as leaders on both sides began to make more rational decisions. Commander Depth's analysis of the changing military situation revealed that the elimination of the organism's influence was having immediate effects on the conduct of the Clone Wars. Military leaders on both sides of the conflict are beginning to make strategic decisions that prioritize ending the war rather than escalating it, he reported. The organism's manipulation of military strategy is no longer affecting the course of the conflict. The changing nature of the Clone Wars represented one of the most immediate and visible effects of the organism's elimination. The conflict that had been artificially prolonged and escalated by the organism's manipulation was beginning to move toward natural resolution as the psychological influences that had affected key decision-makers were removed. Your team's analysis of the organism's historical records revealed the full scope of what had been accomplished by the resistance effort. The creature that had manipulated galactic events for millennia, that had guided the development of civilizations and engineered conflicts for its own purposes, had been permanently eliminated from the galaxy. The organism's elimination represented a turning point in galactic history that was comparable to the most significant events in the development of civilization. The hidden influence that had shaped political, military, and technological development for thousands of years was gone, creating opportunities for organic life to develop and evolve according to natural processes rather than artificial manipulation. Dr. Nala C's continued analysis of the organism's biological systems revealed that the creature's elimination was complete and permanent. The organism's biological networks show no signs of residual activity, she reported. The creature's neural systems have been completely disabled by the countermeasures, and there's no possibility of recovery or regeneration. The permanence of the organism's elimination was crucial to ensuring that the threat to galactic civilization had been truly eliminated. The creature's sophisticated intelligence and adaptive capabilities had made it a formidable opponent, but the biological countermeasures had been designed to ensure that the organism could not recover from the attack. Commander Depth's tactical assessment of the post-elimination situation revealed that the resistance networks throughout the galaxy were beginning to transition from combat operations to recovery and reconstruction efforts. The resistance networks are reporting that the organism's installations have been completely eliminated, he reported. The networks are now focusing on helping affected worlds recover from the organism's influence. The transition from combat to recovery represented a new phase in the resistance effort. The networks that had spent centuries preparing for the organism's elimination were now focused on helping galactic civilization recover from the effects of millennia of artificial manipulation. Your team's role in the recovery effort involved documenting the organism's activities and ensuring that the knowledge gained from the resistance effort was preserved for future generations. The organism's elimination had been achieved through the coordinated efforts of resistance networks that had preserved knowledge across centuries, and it was important to ensure that this knowledge was not lost. The documentation of the organism's activities revealed the full scope of its influence over galactic history. The creature had been involved in virtually every major political, military, and technological development in galactic civilization, guiding events to serve its own purposes while remaining hidden from detection. Dr. Nala C's analysis of the organism's historical influence revealed patterns that explained many of the unexplained mysteries in galactic history. The organism's manipulation explains many of the seemingly irrational decisions and unexplained events that have shaped galactic civilization, she reported. The creature's influence was so pervasive that it affected virtually every aspect of galactic development. The revelation of the organism's historical influence provided explanations for countless mysteries and anomalies in galactic history. The creature's manipulation had been so subtle and sophisticated that its effects had been attributed to natural political and social processes, but the elimination of its influence was revealing the artificial nature of many historical events. Commander Depth's analysis of the organism's military influence revealed that the creature had been involved in engineering and manipulating conflicts throughout galactic history. The organism's records show that it manipulated military conflicts to create opportunities for processing organic matter and advancing technological development, he reported. Many of the galaxy's major wars were artificially engineered by the organism. The organism's manipulation of military conflicts had been one of its most effective methods for creating the conditions it needed for expansion and development. The creature had engineered conflicts that would produce large amounts of organic matter for processing while also driving technological advancement that could be incorporated into its own systems. Your team's understanding of the organism's elimination revealed that the resistance effort had achieved more than just the elimination of a specific threat. The removal of the organism's influence was creating opportunities for galactic civilization to develop according to natural processes, potentially leading to forms of political, social, and technological development that would have been impossible under the organism's manipulation. The long-term implications of the organism's elimination were profound and far-reaching. The creature's influence had been so pervasive that its removal was essentially allowing galactic civilization to begin developing according to its natural potential for the first time in millennia. Dr. Nalis's analysis of the recovering planetary ecosystem revealed that Geonosis was beginning to show signs of biological diversity that had been suppressed by the organism's influence. The planet's natural ecosystem is beginning to recover, she reported. Species that had been suppressed or modified by the organism's biological manipulation are beginning to return to their natural forms. The recovery of Geonosis's natural ecosystem represented a microcosm of the changes that were occurring throughout the galaxy. The organism's biological manipulation had affected not just political and military affairs, but had also influenced the development of natural ecosystems on countless worlds. Commander Depth's monitoring of galactic communications revealed that worlds throughout the galaxy were reporting similar environmental recoveries. Worlds that had been affected by the organism's biological manipulation are reporting improvements in air quality, water purity, and biological diversity, he reported. The organism's elimination is having positive environmental effects across multiple star systems. The environmental recovery occurring throughout the galaxy represented one of the most visible and immediate benefits of the organism's elimination. The creature's biological manipulation had been affecting natural ecosystems for millennia, and its removal was allowing these systems to begin recovering their natural balance. Your team's final analysis of the organism's domain revealed that the creature's installations were beginning to decompose naturally as their biological systems shut down. The organic architecture that had seemed so alien and threatening was returning to natural biological matter, leaving behind only the minerals and metals that had been incorporated into the organism's structure. The natural decomposition of the organism's installations was eliminating the last physical traces of the creature's presence in the galaxy. The installations that had been hidden beneath the surface of worlds throughout the galaxy were beginning to break down, returning their constituent materials to the natural ecosystem. As your team prepared to leave Geonosis and return to the broader galactic community, the full scope of what had been accomplished became clear. The organism that had manipulated galactic civilization for millennia had been permanently eliminated, its installations had been destroyed, and its influence over political, military, and environmental affairs had been removed. The elimination of the organism represented a new beginning for galactic civilization. For the first time in millennia, organic life throughout the galaxy would be free to develop according to natural processes rather than artificial manipulation. The resistance effort that had been prepared for centuries had achieved complete success, preserving the future of organic life and ensuring that the galaxy's natural potential could finally be realized. The return journey to the surface of Geonosis revealed a world transformed by the absence of the ancient intelligence that had dwelt in its depths for millennia. As your team emerged from the underground passages for the final time, the twin suns of the Geonosian system cast their light across a landscape that seemed somehow lighter, as if a weight that had pressed down upon the planet for thousands of years had finally been lifted. The rust-colored dust that had perpetually shrouded the planet's surface was beginning to settle, revealing geological formations that had been hidden for centuries. The natural contours of the land were emerging from beneath the artificial modifications that the organism had made to serve its purposes, allowing the planet's original beauty to shine through for the first time in living memory. Dr. Nalasi's final atmospheric readings revealed that Geonosis was experiencing the cleanest air quality in recorded history. The organic compounds that had been artificially maintained in the atmosphere to facilitate the organism's psychological manipulation were dissipating naturally, leaving behind an atmosphere that could support a wider variety of life than had been possible for millennia. Commander-depth seismic monitoring equipment detected a planet that was settling into geological stability after the removal of the vast biological systems that had been integrated into its crust. The gentle tremors that marked the final collapse of the organism's tunnel networks were already subsiding, leaving behind caverns that would eventually become natural caves filled with the pure water that was beginning to flow through the planet's restored geological systems. The abandoned Geonosian structures that dotted the landscape were beginning to show signs of natural reclamation. Without the organism's influence to suppress natural biological processes, native plant life was beginning to take root in the cracks and crevices of the ancient architecture. The geometric patterns that had characterized Geonosian construction were being softened by the organic curves of vines and moss that were slowly transforming the artificial structures into works of natural art. Your team's final survey of the planet's surface revealed that the processing facilities and droid foundries that had once churned out instruments of war were now silent and still. The massive machinery that had been used to manufacture the weapons of conflict was beginning to rust and decay, returning its constituent metals to the soil where they could nourish new growth. The research station that had served as your team's base of operations was bustling with activity as Republic scientists worked to document the environmental changes that were occurring across the planet. The data they were collecting would help other worlds understand the recovery processes that would follow the elimination of the organism's influence from their own ecosystems. As your team prepared to leave Geonosis, the communication arrays began receiving reports from across the galaxy that painted a picture of universal recovery and renewal. Worlds that had been affected by the organism's biological manipulation were experiencing environmental improvements that had not been seen for centuries. The reports described skies that were clearer than they had been in living memory, water that was purer than historical records indicated was possible, and ecosystems that were displaying levels of biodiversity that had been thought extinct. The organism's elimination was allowing natural processes to resume their course throughout the galaxy, creating environmental conditions that supported life in ways that had been suppressed for millennia. Dr. Nalasi's analysis of the galactic recovery reports revealed that the environmental improvements were being accompanied by social and political changes that were equally profound. Political leaders throughout the galaxy were making decisions with clarity and wisdom that had been absent during the years of the organism's influence, leading to diplomatic solutions to conflicts that had seemed intractable just days before. The Clone Wars, which had been artificially prolonged and escalated by the organism's manipulation, were moving rapidly toward resolution as leaders on both sides began to prioritize peace over conflict. The artificial animosity that had been maintained by the organism's psychological influence was dissipating, allowing natural diplomatic processes to resume their course. Commander Depth's monitoring of military communications revealed that commanders throughout the galaxy were implementing ceasefire agreements and beginning negotiations for permanent peace settlements. The military strategies that had been influenced by the organism's manipulation of tactical thinking were being replaced by approaches that prioritized the preservation of life over the advancement of military objectives. Your team's departure from Geonosis marked the end of an archaeological mission that had revealed truths about the nature of galactic civilization that would reshape the understanding of history for generations to come. The knowledge that had been gained about the organism's influence would help future researchers understand the artificial nature of many historical events and would provide context for the natural development of civilization that was now beginning. The transport that carried your team away from Geonosis provided a final view of the planet that had been the center of such momentous events. From space, the world appeared peaceful and serene, its surface no longer shrouded in the artificial dust clouds that had been maintained by the organism's atmospheric manipulation. The planet's natural colors were beginning to emerge, revealing a world of surprising beauty that had been hidden for millennia. The journey through hyperspace provided time for reflection on the magnitude of what had been accomplished. The organism that had shaped galactic history from the shadows for thousands of years had been permanently eliminated, its influence removed from the countless worlds where it had operated in secret. The galaxy was free to develop according to its natural potential for the first time in recorded history. Dr. Nalasi's final report on the mission would become one of the most significant scientific documents in galactic history, documenting the discovery and elimination of a threat that had been invisible to conventional analysis. Her research would help future scientists understand the subtle signs of biological manipulation and would provide the knowledge needed to prevent similar threats from developing undetected. Commander Depth's tactical analysis of the resistance operation would become a model for coordinated military action across galactic distances. The techniques that had been used to coordinate the simultaneous attack on the organism's installations would revolutionize military strategy and would provide the foundation for defensive preparations against future threats to galactic civilization. Your archaeological documentation of the organism's activities would provide historians with the context needed to understand the artificial nature of many historical events. The knowledge that political conflicts, technological developments, and social changes had been influenced by the organism's manipulation would lead to a fundamental re-examination of galactic history and would help future generations understand the natural course of civilization's development. As your team's transport approached the core worlds, the communication arrays began receiving updates from the resistance networks that had coordinated the galaxy-wide elimination of the organism. The networks were transitioning from their covert operations to open cooperation with galactic governments, sharing the knowledge they had preserved for centuries and helping to guide the recovery efforts that were beginning throughout the galaxy. The resistance network's emergence from secrecy represented the beginning of a new era of transparency and cooperation in galactic affairs. The knowledge that had been preserved in hidden archives for millennia was being shared openly, providing the foundation for scientific and technological developments that would benefit all forms of organic life. The peaceful conclusion of the mission that had begun with the investigation of mysterious disappearances on Geonosis had resulted in the liberation of galactic civilization from an influence that had shaped its development for thousands of years. The organism's elimination had created opportunities for natural growth and development that would allow the galaxy's organic inhabitants to reach their full potential. As the stars wheeled slowly through space around your transport, carrying the light of countless worlds where life was beginning to flourish without artificial constraint, the future stretched ahead with possibilities that had been unimaginable just days before. The galaxy was free, its inhabitants were recovering from millennia of subtle manipulation, and the natural course of organic development could finally resume. The ancient intelligence that had whispered in the darkness beneath Geonosis was silent forever, its vast networks of manipulation dismantled, its influence over galactic affairs permanently eliminated. In its place, the natural wisdom of organic life was beginning to assert itself, promising a future of growth, cooperation, and discovery that would honor the sacrifice of those who had worked for centuries to preserve the galaxy's freedom. The stars themselves seemed to shine more brightly in the aftermath of the organism's elimination, as if the universe itself was celebrating the return of natural order to the galaxy. In the peaceful silence of space, surrounded by the light of countless worlds where life could now flourish according to its own design, the true victory of the resistance effort became clear. Not just the elimination of a threat, but the restoration of hope itself.